What if the ultimate battle between good and evil wasn't about destruction, but about transformation? Discover how even the darkest force in creation plays a pivotal role in bringing about the most glorious victory the universe has ever known. In the beginning, there was only the divine, an eternal presence, neither born nor made, existing beyond time, space, and human comprehension. This presence, known as God, had no origin. God simply was. It was the beginning of everything, yet not the beginning of God, for God has always existed in perfect harmony, untouched by the constraints of time. The divine was pure, infinite love, and within that love resided the most fundamental of gifts, free will. The concept of free will is the paradox that runs through all of creation, a gift so profound it shapes the very essence of existence. In the vastness of the divine's omnipotence, the power to create worlds, to shape realities, was not driven solely by need, but by choice. This was the cornerstone of creation, a choice made freely. God created not just for the sake of creation itself, but to offer others the opportunity to choose, to love, and to act according to their will. The divine did not simply dictate existence. It invited beings into the creation story, allowing them to forge their own paths in the cosmic order. It is within this divine paradox of omnipotence and free will that the question of why God cannot kill Satan begins to take root. The existence of Satan, of evil itself, is not a flaw in the divine's creation, but an inevitable consequence of the freedom God granted. If everything were governed solely by divine force, there would be no room for love, no room for authentic relationships or choices. There would be no free will. But God, in the vast wisdom of the divine, allowed for the possibility of rebellion because love without choice would be meaningless. Love that is coerced is not love at all. Satan, once known as Lucifer, was not created as an adversary. He was a being of immense beauty and power, part of the heavenly host, entrusted with the task of leading. However, with this immense power came the ability to choose. Lucifer's fall was not simply a matter of pride or disobedience. It was the manifestation of the choice to seek autonomy, to desire control, to desire something beyond what had been freely given. It was a rebellion born from the desire to break free from the divine order, to challenge the established norms of love, beauty, and truth. Yet in doing so, he only served to reveal the divine nature of choice itself. His fall was not a mistake in creation, but a demonstration of the fundamental necessity of free will in God's plan. If God were to destroy Satan, it would not just be the removal of evil, but the negation of the very principle of choice that underpins creation. It would be an act that contradicts the nature of love itself, an imposition of divine will over the freedom that defines the relationship between God and creation. And so, God, in all of his omnipotence, must allow Satan to exist, to fulfill his role as the adversary, not as a mistake, but as an integral part of the cosmic balance that enables all beings to choose. It is through this choice, this freedom, that the world finds its true meaning, and the nature of God's justice is fully realized. Good and evil, as concepts, are often understood through the lens of human experience, yet their true nature transcends human comprehension. In the divine framework, both good and evil are necessary counterparts that exist within the vast cosmic balance. The divine nature, by its very essence, is inherently good. This is not a moral judgment, but a reflection of the perfect harmony within God's will. Goodness, in this sense, is the force that brings order, life, and love to creation. It is the foundation upon which the entire universe stands, a reflection of the divine's purity, beauty, and boundless love. When God created the heavens and the earth, he did so with an inherent goodness. Each aspect of creation, from the smallest grain of sand to the vast galaxies, was made with intention and purpose. The divine act of creation, in all its complexity, was not a random event but an expression of the divine's will for harmony and flourishing. Everything God created was good, not just in a moral sense, but in the sense that it fulfilled its purpose within the grand design. From the stars to the oceans, from animals to humans, everything was designed to function together, reflecting the beauty of divine order. However, the existence of evil within creation complicates the simplicity of this divine goodness. Evil, in its purest sense, is not a creation of God, but rather a perversion of the good. It is the absence of good, the distortion of order and harmony, a force that seeks to undermine the intended design of creation. Evil enters the cosmic balance not as a force that exists alongside good in equal measure, but as a deviation, a corrupting influence that seeks to disrupt the beauty of the divine plan. It is the misalignment of free will, the rejection of divine goodness, and the embrace of disorder. God's creation was not inherently flawed because of the presence of evil, but rather, evil exists as a result of the gift of free will. In a world where only good existed, there would be no room for choice, no room for authentic relationships or growth. It is through the possibility of evil, the ability to choose against the divine order, that creation becomes dynamic, alive, and free. Free will, the very gift that allows beings to love and to choose, also allows for the possibility of evil. The existence of evil, then, is not a contradiction to divine goodness, but a consequence of the freedom granted by the divine. God did not create evil, but in his wisdom, he allowed for its possibility. The story of creation, the story of God's goodness, is incomplete without the presence of evil, for it is through the presence of choice, the ability to choose good or evil, that the full nature of divine love and justice is revealed. Goodness, in its fullness, is not static but dynamic, growing and flourishing in the face of adversity. In this way, the relationship between good and evil is not one of equals, but of necessity. Evil cannot exist without good, for it is the absence of good, and goodness, in turn, prevails through its very resistance to evil. Lucifer, the light-bringer, was once a being of unparalleled beauty and perfection. Created by God as one of the highest of all angels, Lucifer held a unique place in the divine hierarchy. His radiance was unmatched, his wisdom vast, and his strength formidable. He was the epitome of divine creation, a being designed to reflect the glory of God in a way few others could. The heavenly realms, where he resided, were a realm of perfect harmony, where every being understood their role and served the divine will with absolute clarity. In this environment of celestial perfection, Lucifer flourished. His role was to guide and protect, to serve as a beacon of God's light, and to inspire the other angels to uphold the divine order. In many ways, Lucifer represented the zenith of God's creative work. He was entrusted with great responsibility, a position of both power and reverence, yet even within this state of divine harmony, something began to stir within him. Pride is often seen as the downfall of beings, but in Lucifer's case, it was born from the very perfection with which he was endowed. He had been given the gift of beauty, wisdom, and strength, and in these gifts, he found not just a purpose but a reflection of his own greatness. It is here that the seed of his rebellion took root. Lucifer, in his perfection, began to see his own beauty, not as a reflection of God's glory, but as a manifestation of his own power. The more he contemplated his own radiance, the more he became enamored with the idea that he might be deserving of more. Ambition, once a natural extension of his perfection, began to warp into something darker. He looked at his fellow angels, those who were also created in perfection, and began to feel a sense of superiority. Lucifer's ambition grew not from a desire to serve God more fully, but from the subtle whisper that he might be worthy of equal, if not greater, glory. What began as a longing for self-expression transformed into a craving for recognition, for dominion. The perfect being began to entertain the thought that he could be the equal of God, that perhaps he could govern the heavenly realms not as a servant but as a ruler. It is this ambition, rooted in pride, that led to Lucifer's fall. In his perfection, he became blind to the fact that true greatness was not in seeking glory for oneself, but in humbly reflecting the divine light of God. His ambition, once pure, became tainted by the belief that he could transcend the boundaries set for him, that his brilliance was a power that should not be confined. Thus, the Lightbringer, once the embodiment of divine beauty, became the one who sought to eclipse the very source of that light, leading him down the path of rebellion and, ultimately, to his fall. Lucifer's rebellion was not born of hatred, but of a quiet, insidious desire for autonomy. In the perfection of his being, he became increasingly dissatisfied with his position, no longer content to reflect God's glory. Instead, he yearned to shine in his own right, to be seen as an entity worthy of admiration independent of the divine. The celestial harmony that once held him in reverence now seemed like a cage. His beauty, wisdom, and power, once seen as gifts from God, became the source of his discontent. The more he reflected on his greatness, the more convinced he became that he was capable of ruling, of standing beside God rather than beneath him. In his desire to break free from divine authority, Lucifer began to nurture the idea of an alternative path, one where he would no longer be subject to the will of God. He no longer sought to glorify God's name through his service, but sought instead to glorify his own. The desire for control, the thirst for sovereignty, consumed him, and with it, the seeds of rebellion took root. It was not a sudden burst of defiance, but a slow, deliberate whisper that grew louder in his mind, an idea that consumed him from within. Lucifer began to speak in hushed tones among the other angels, sowing the seeds of dissent. He questioned the divine order, not out of malice, but out of the belief that a being of his nature should be free to govern. He argued that God, in his omnipotence, could not fully understand the desires and ambitions of those created in his image. The other angels, at first unsure, were slowly drawn to Lucifer's vision of a new order, one where freedom from God's command would allow them to explore their full potential. A rebellion in heaven was a dangerous thing. Lucifer's ambition and rhetoric led to a point where his discontent could no longer be ignored. The time for subtlety passed, and Lucifer made his final move, rallying his followers in a direct challenge to the throne of God. He sought to usurp God's place, to claim the sovereignty of heaven as his own. The rebellion was swift but fateful. As the war between Lucifer and the loyal angels unfolded, it became clear that Lucifer's desire for autonomy had blinded him to the true nature of divine power. In the end, Lucifer's rebellion was crushed by the weight of divine justice. His pride had led him to defy the very source of his being, and for that, he was cast out. The once brilliant angel, now fallen, was no longer Lucifer, the Lightbringer, but Satan, the adversary. His transformation was not just physical but spiritual, a darkening of the soul that mirrored the loss of the purity he had once embodied. His fall from grace was complete, and he became the embodiment of everything he had once resisted: rebellion, pride, and the thirst for power that corrupted his very essence. Satan's existence, though born from rebellion, serves a profound and paradoxical purpose in the cosmic order. As the opposer, the challenger, and the one who resists, Satan's role is deeply intertwined with the divine narrative. Though it may not be immediately apparent, his defiance against God is not merely an act of destruction but a necessary part of the unfolding of creation. Without opposition, there is no true growth. Without challenge, there is no opportunity for strength to be proven or virtue to be tested. The very essence of free will, the cornerstone of God's creation, requires an antagonist. If every choice were devoid of temptation or resistance, then no choice would hold meaning. It is in the face of adversity, in the moment when one must choose between what is right and what is tempting, that the true nature of free will reveals itself. Satan, then, is not just a force of chaos and destruction. He is a facilitator of choice, a force that allows creation to continue its path toward fulfillment. Through his opposition, beings of free will, be they angels, humans, or other creations, are given the chance to rise above temptation, to choose what is right, and in doing so, to participate in the divine plan on a deeper, more personal level. Though Satan embodies evil, his role is not purely destructive. His existence challenges the goodness of creation, but it also serves to highlight the necessity of divine justice. Without Satan's defiance, God's justice would remain an abstract concept rather than a fully realized truth. It is only through the existence of opposition that divine justice can be experienced, measured, and upheld. By being the one who challenges, Satan allows the divine order to display its full glory, not in the absence of evil, but in the triumph over it. In this way, Satan is not simply an agent of disorder. He is, in a manner of speaking, a part of the larger design, an uninvited, yet necessary, participant in the divine drama. His actions serve as a reminder of the consequences of free will and the importance of moral choice. Without him, the narrative of redemption, the journey of human and angelic souls toward enlightenment and divine unity, would lack depth and significance. It is through the struggle, through the opposition, that the divine plan moves forward, allowing each soul the opportunity to transcend its limitations and choose the path that leads to God. Thus, while Satan's rebellion was born of pride and ambition, it is in his role as the antagonist, the one who stands in contrast to God's will, that he fulfills a necessary function in the divine order. The tension between good and evil, between light and darkness, is what gives life meaning, and Satan, though fallen, is a crucial element in maintaining that balance. Free will, the gift bestowed upon all conscious beings by God, is the very foundation of existence. It allows for love, growth, and the potential for redemption, but it also carries with it the weight of consequence. When Lucifer, once perfect and radiant, chose rebellion, he chose it with his free will, rejecting divine harmony in favor of his own vision. This act of defiance was not only a rejection of God's authority, but a rejection of the balance that sustains the universe. The consequences of that decision rippled through creation, touching everything from the heavens to the very souls of humanity. Lucifer's rebellion against God was a direct result of his free will. He was not coerced or manipulated into his choices. Rather, his pride, his desire for autonomy, and his ambition to be equal with God led him to defy the very source of his existence. His fall was not an inevitable flaw in his design, but rather a tragic consequence of the misuse of free will. It is this tension, the ability to choose, even against divine will, that makes the story of Lucifer's rebellion so complex. His fall was a result of his own choices, and yet, the very existence of choice gave rise to his rebellion. The paradox lies in the fact that free will, the very thing that makes love and relationship with God possible, also makes defiance and separation a real option. In the divine scheme, God allowed free will to exist because, without it, creation would be a mechanical, predetermined series of actions, devoid of true connection or meaning. Love, the greatest of divine virtues, cannot exist without choice. To love God freely, beings must also have the capacity to reject him. God's gift of free will is a form of trust, one that allows creation to evolve in ways that are not only unforced but also authentic. In Lucifer's rebellion, God did not force him to remain faithful, nor did he take away the freedom to choose. Instead, God's control is not in the micromanagement of every action, but in the overarching intention behind creation, freedom that comes with responsibility, a choice that comes with consequence. This tension between free will and divine control is central to understanding the cosmic order. God's control over creation does not mean he dictates every action. Rather, his sovereignty lies in the wisdom of allowing creation to unfold in freedom, knowing that true love, true righteousness, and true connection can only exist when the possibility of choosing otherwise is real. The consequence of Lucifer's rebellion was the ultimate manifestation of this truth. The fall was not only a tragic result of pride and ambition, but a necessary outcome of free will, allowing the universe to maintain its balance between love and law, freedom and order. Lucifer, through his choice, revealed the gravity of free will, and the path to redemption became not only a matter of return, but of understanding the cost of separation from the divine. Divine justice is often seen as an inevitable force, a fundamental aspect of the universe that ensures balance and order. It is not a cold, distant mechanism, but a deeply entwined characteristic of God's nature, one that flows from his love and mercy. While justice demands that wrongs be addressed, it also serves as a way to preserve the sanctity of creation. Evil cannot go unchecked, for allowing it to grow would threaten the harmony that sustains all things. And yet, the paradox of divine justice lies in its simultaneous capacity for mercy. How can a God who is love and goodness bring about punishment? How can justice be executed without contradicting the very essence of his being? When Lucifer rebelled, it was not simply an act of disobedience, but a deep violation of the natural order. His pride and desire for autonomy were not mere errors, but a rejection of the divine structure that upheld the universe. And yet, God did not destroy him immediately. Instead, he allowed Lucifer's fall to play out, marking the beginning of a profound cosmic struggle. This is the essence of divine justice, not a reactionary wrath, but a measured, intentional act to restore what has been broken. God's justice is not about vindication or personal vengeance. It is about the preservation of balance and the rightful order of creation. In that balance, mercy plays a pivotal role. Mercy is not the absence of justice, but its fulfillment in a way that preserves the dignity of the individual and the potential for redemption. God's justice is always tempered with mercy because he desires that none should perish but that all should be reconciled to him. The very act of creating free will, knowing the potential for rebellion, was a demonstration of mercy. God did not seek blind obedience but relationship. And even when that relationship was broken, he made a way for restoration. Lucifer's rebellion could have been wiped from existence, but God allowed him to continue, not out of weakness, but out of the possibility of repentance and the chance for a more meaningful restoration of what was lost. This tension between justice and mercy defines the divine approach to all wrongdoing. While evil must be confronted, its eradication is not the end of the story. The punishment of the wicked is not simply to destroy them, but to reveal the consequences of their choices. And through that revelation, God extends an opportunity for transformation. Justice is fulfilled when wrongs are addressed, but mercy is what allows for the possibility of redemption. The paradox of divine justice, then, is not that it contradicts God's love, but that it is an expression of it. It is love that corrects, love that challenges, and love that ultimately calls creation back to itself, even when that return requires deep pain. God's justice, in the end, is a reflection of his love, uncompromising yet deeply compassionate, severe yet filled with hope. Satan's power, while real and impactful in the world, is fundamentally limited. Despite his rebellious nature and his ability to influence the hearts and minds of humanity, his authority never equals that of God. Satan's realm is one of deception and corruption, yet it is only within the boundaries allowed by God that he is able to act. This limitation is crucial to understanding the cosmic struggle, for while Satan may seem to hold sway over certain aspects of the world, he is ultimately operating within the confines of divine control. The power that Satan exercises is rooted in manipulation. He cannot create or sustain life, nor can he change the fundamental laws of creation. His greatest weapon is his ability to corrupt the good, to distort the truth, and to lead others away from the path of righteousness. He tempts, deceives, and entices, using the weaknesses of humanity to bring about sin and disorder. However, even in his deception, Satan is still bound by the ultimate sovereignty of God. His power is granted in measured amounts, and he can never exceed what God permits. God's authority stands in stark contrast to Satan's rebelliousness. While Satan seeks autonomy, desiring to act outside of divine will, God's rule is absolute and unyielding. Satan's rebellion, though it was once a challenge to divine authority, has never been able to alter the fundamental truth that God is supreme. Even in moments of apparent victory, when it seems that evil has triumphed or that chaos reigns, God's purpose is still unfolding. Satan may be able to disrupt the flow of creation, but he cannot change its ultimate direction. God's authority governs all things, even the actions of the enemy, who is unaware that he is being used to fulfill the divine will. This cosmic balance is what gives Satan's actions a tragic aspect. Though he rebels and seeks to usurp God's throne, he is ultimately powerless to overthrow the Creator. His influence in the world is significant, but it is never unlimited. God's control remains constant, and even in the midst of evil, his purposes are being fulfilled. Satan's power is one of rebellion and pride, but it is always constrained by the higher law of divine sovereignty. His authority is nothing more than a shadow, and in the end, it will dissolve before the light of God's unshakable reign. Satan, for all his cunning and force, is still a created being. His power is borrowed, his authority derivative. He can challenge and deceive, but he can never rival the Creator. This is the ultimate truth that defines the nature of his rebellion. He is but a fragment of creation, seeking to usurp what he can never possess. The concept of redemption, though often reserved for humanity, stretches into even the most unexpected realms. God, in his infinite mercy and wisdom, does not create beings for destruction, but for purpose. While humanity's path to redemption is clearly outlined through grace, repentance, and the salvation offered through Christ, the question arises: could there be redemption for Satan? This idea challenges the very nature of good and evil, for Satan is the embodiment of rebellion, the ultimate antagonist to divine order. Yet, within the framework of divine justice, mercy, and love, there is a tension between what seems to be a complete fall from grace and the potential for restoration. God's decision to allow Satan to exist despite his rebellion speaks to a profound mystery within the divine plan. If God's love is all-encompassing and his justice perfectly balanced, why does he not simply destroy Satan, ending the torment, chaos, and temptation he brings into the world? The answer lies within the nature of creation itself. To destroy Satan would be to destroy the very freedom that defines creation's purpose. For beings to choose love, righteousness, and good, they must also be given the choice to reject it. In allowing Satan to exist, God has preserved the sacredness of free will, ensuring that love and goodness are not forced upon creation, but chosen freely. Satan, in his rebellion, became the embodiment of choice gone awry. He represents the extremes of free will when it is used not to love and to serve, but to rebel and to turn away from the divine. But this does not negate the possibility of redemption, for God's nature is one of grace, even to those who have fallen furthest from his will. The idea of redemption, however, is not one that can be easily comprehended in terms of Satan, for redemption presupposes repentance, an acknowledgement of wrong, and a turning back toward the divine. Satan's refusal to repent, his prideful insistence on autonomy, makes such redemption an almost impossible prospect. He is not merely an enemy to humanity, but a defiant force against the very nature of God's love. Yet, the question remains: why does God allow Satan to continue? In part, it is because of the necessity of Satan's role in the cosmic order. As the great opposer, Satan provides the conditions under which humanity's free will can be tested, refined, and purified. Without opposition, without a force that challenges goodness, the choice for righteousness would lose its meaning. Satan, in his rebellion, serves as a tool in the broader divine narrative, illustrating the consequences of rejecting God's will. In a sense, God allows Satan's existence not because he is beyond the reach of grace, but because his existence allows the ultimate expression of choice and the true nature of redemption to unfold in the world. Satan's continued existence, despite his rebellion, reflects the deep complexities of divine love and justice. It illustrates that, even in the face of overwhelming evil, God does not abandon his creation, but rather allows all beings the space to choose. Whether or not Satan will ever seek redemption remains unclear, but his role in the unfolding cosmic drama will forever be one that tests the boundaries of free will, justice, and the possibility of grace. Satan's role in the world is not simply that of an antagonist, but one that carries a profound responsibility in the divine test of humanity. From the very beginning, when he first led the rebellion in heaven, his purpose shifted into a darker one: to test, tempt, and challenge humanity's fidelity to God. This role as tempter is not a random act of malice, but is, in the paradoxical ways of divine justice, an essential part of the process that allows the purity of human faith to be fully realized. Through temptation, humanity is given the chance to prove the depth of their devotion and commitment to God's will. Temptation, in itself, is not inherently evil. It becomes a test of free will and faith. Just as God bestowed upon humanity the gift of free will, Satan embodies the force that challenges humans to exercise that will in choosing good or evil. The Garden of Eden is the first significant encounter with temptation, where Satan, in the form of a serpent, persuades Eve to eat the forbidden fruit. This moment marks the first instance where humanity is presented with a choice: to obey the command of God or to succumb to the allure of something that promises more knowledge, power, autonomy. In choosing to give in to temptation, the first human beings do not just break a divine command, they also fracture their relationship with God, setting the stage for the ongoing struggle between sin and righteousness. However, while Satan's role in temptation is often seen as a direct path to humanity's fall, it is crucial to recognize that temptation is not the sole cause of sin. Rather, it is the human response to temptation that defines the outcome. Satan may entice, deceive, and lead astray, but it is humanity's choice whether to follow. The test is not in the temptation itself, but in how one reacts to it, how one chooses to stand firm in faith and resist what is offered. God's allowance of Satan to tempt humanity is not a betrayal of his creation, but a means of allowing true love and devotion to be forged in the fires of trial. Without temptation, the strength of faith would remain untested. It is through resisting temptation that humanity can grow in righteousness, align more closely with divine will, and demonstrate the worthiness of their love for God. Satan's role in temptation also reveals the nature of the cosmic battle between good and evil. As the tempter, Satan reflects the rebellion that originated in his own pride and jealousy. He seeks to lead others into the same corruption, the same separation from God. But in this struggle, there is a profound counterbalance. Temptation, while a force that leads towards sin, also creates the opportunity for redemption, for restoration. Each time humanity resists the pull of temptation and turns toward God, the divine love that flows through them is made manifest, growing stronger and more resilient. In this divine test, the consequences of sin may be far-reaching, but they also provide the stage for grace. It is only through the very temptation Satan brings that the true power of faith, love, and the willingness to choose good over evil can be understood. Through it all, Satan remains a tool in the hands of divine providence, a means by which humanity's faith is shaped and proven. The cosmic struggle between good and evil is not a mere battle of wills, but a fundamental element of the universe's design. It is through this conflict that the nature of existence itself is understood, refined, and elevated. The tension between light and darkness is not an aberration. It is integral to the growth and unfolding of creation. As much as the forces of good, embodied by God and His divine will, seek to nurture harmony and order, the forces of evil, led by Satan and his legions, work to distort and disrupt. This ongoing battle is not one of mere opposition but of transformation, shaping both the cosmic order and the spiritual development of beings within it. At the heart of this struggle lies the delicate balance that exists within all of creation. If the universe were simply filled with light, there would be no true understanding of its significance. If everything were aligned with the will of God, there would be no free will, no meaningful choice. The very existence of evil, of Satan, of temptation, provides the opportunity for growth, for beings to develop understanding and wisdom. It is through struggle and conflict that true strength, clarity, and purpose emerge. Without opposition, the force of good would lack definition and context. It is the constant interplay between these opposing forces that propels the universe toward fulfillment, as each being chooses its path and in doing so refines the essence of creation. The cosmic struggle is not only external but internal as well. Every individual, every soul, is called to confront this eternal tension within themselves. Temptation and sin, embodied in Satan's role, represent the shadow that each must face. To choose goodness in the face of darkness is not merely an external act but a profound internal victory. This battle between good and evil within each individual echoes the larger struggle that defines the universe, one where every choice made contributes to the spiritual evolution of the self and the collective. Each soul's response to temptation, each choice toward light or darkness, adds weight to the unfolding of the cosmic narrative. At a broader level, this struggle is the crucible in which the moral fabric of the universe is tested and strengthened. The forces of good and evil clash not just for supremacy, but for the very soul of creation. Yet, in the divine wisdom of God, this conflict is not one that leads to ultimate destruction, but to eventual reconciliation and understanding. The ultimate victory of good over evil will not be a momentary triumph, but a cosmic restoration, a return to the divine harmony that was disrupted with the rise of Satan's rebellion. This ongoing battle, then, is not a futile war but a necessary element of creation's process. It is through the experience of this cosmic struggle that beings come to understand their own purpose, their place in the grand design, and the nature of the divine that governs all. The conflict itself, rather than being a disruption, is a catalyst for the deeper understanding and growth that will eventually lead all of creation to its ultimate fulfillment. The tension between good and evil is not only inevitable, it is essential for the unfolding of a cosmic story that continues to reveal the profound mysteries of existence. God's character, in its essence, is non-violent, rooted deeply in an overwhelming love that transcends all understanding. Unlike the forces of evil, which seek to assert themselves through force and destruction, the divine operates through patience, compassion, and a boundless capacity for mercy. This is the foundation of God's rule. His power is not expressed in violence, but in the pure, transformative energy of love. Love is not a passive force. It is a dynamic, active presence that calls all of creation toward reconciliation, healing, and restoration. Violence, as a means of control or correction, stands in direct opposition to the nature of God. In the divine scheme, God does not seek to overpower or annihilate, but instead to invite, to redeem, and to offer a path of transformation. The presence of evil in the world, symbolized by Satan and his rebellion, does not prompt God to respond with violent retaliation, but with patient endurance and the establishment of moral order through guidance and choice. His love, unbounded by time and space, allows for the presence of evil without succumbing to it, offering space for free will to operate, while never withdrawing his offer of redemption. This nonviolent approach reflects a profound understanding of the nature of creation. God does not need to force His will upon the world because His love is the most compelling force in existence. Love does not dominate. It invites and transforms. Where violence seeks to break, destroy, and reshape by force, love nurtures, heals, and elevates. God's nonviolence is not a weakness. It is the strength to allow the process of redemption to unfold naturally, to provide every soul with the opportunity to choose light over darkness, to choose reconciliation over division. By refusing to resort to violence, God affirms the inherent dignity and freedom of His creation. To destroy Satan or any being through violent means would undermine the very freedom that makes love meaningful. It would be an imposition of will that negates the ability to choose, to grow, and to evolve in the ways that define true freedom. The divine approach, then, does not impose but encourages, offering opportunities for repentance and transformation rather than casting out or annihilating. This is the profound nature of divine justice, an invitation to return, to repent, and to align once more with the Creator. In this framework, God's love is not merely an emotion or a sentiment. It is a force that continuously works to redeem creation, even in the face of evil. His refusal to meet violence with violence, evil with retaliation, upholds the deepest truth of His character. The divine does not bend to the ways of the world, but remains steadfast in the rule of love, proving that it is in mercy, not retribution, that true justice is found. This approach does not dismiss the existence of evil but allows for its eventual defeat through the enduring power of love, a love that is patient, kind, and, ultimately, all-consuming. Creation, in its most profound sense, exists in a delicate balance between light and darkness, order and chaos, good and evil. These opposites are not merely separate forces but interconnected aspects of a greater whole, essential for the unfolding of existence itself. Light cannot be understood without darkness, just as goodness cannot be fully appreciated without the contrast of evil. The duality of creation forms the canvas upon which the story of the universe is painted, allowing for the exploration of choice, consequence, and growth. In this grand tapestry, Satan's existence serves a significant role. His rebellion against God and subsequent transformation into the embodiment of evil is not the cause of corruption but rather a necessary counterpart in the unfolding divine plan. Without darkness, there could be no true understanding of light. Without evil, goodness would have no context, no challenge, and no opportunity to reveal its depth and strength. Satan, as the adversary, serves to highlight the path of righteousness. Through his actions, humanity is given the opportunity to choose, to rise above temptation, and to seek alignment with divine order. God, in His infinite wisdom, allowed for this duality to exist. The creation of beings with free will meant that there had to be the possibility of choice, and with choice, there had to be the possibility of error, of falling into darkness. In this way, Satan's rebellion becomes a necessary feature of the larger cosmic narrative, one that enables the created order to achieve its full potential. If everything were perfect, if only light existed, there would be no true freedom, no true growth, and no possibility for a deeper understanding of divine truth. The contrast between light and darkness, good and evil, becomes the arena in which the soul is tested, shaped, and refined. This duality also provides the space for God's ultimate victory. The presence of evil allows for the manifestation of divine power, mercy, and justice. It is through the struggle against darkness that the light of God's love shines brightest. The tension between these forces invites humans to transcend the primal aspects of their nature, to move beyond mere survival, and to reach towards something greater, something divine. In this way, Satan's existence is not an accident or a flaw in creation, but an essential part of the divine order. His role, while destructive, ultimately serves to elevate the human experience. Through the contrast he provides, humanity is given the opportunity to choose goodness, to seek redemption, and to participate in the cosmic dance of creation's ongoing unfolding. It is within this duality that the true nature of divine love and justice is revealed, not through the absence of evil but through the triumph of light over darkness. Omnipotence, the quality of being all-powerful, is often misunderstood as the ability to do anything, regardless of its nature. It is easy to imagine omnipotence as a force that can erase obstacles, bend reality at will, and undo any wrong. But a deeper exploration reveals that omnipotence, in its truest form, does not involve arbitrary or capricious action. Instead, it is bound by the nature of what it means to be truly good and to create a meaningful universe. God's omnipotence is not the ability to do anything, but the ability to do all things that align with His nature, His will, His love, and His purpose for creation. In creating a world where free will exists, God chose a path that required self-imposed limitations. By granting His creations the power to choose whether to follow divine will or rebel, He, in a sense, limited Himself. God could, with a mere thought, destroy Satan, eliminate evil, and create a perfect world devoid of suffering. But to do so would erase the very essence of freedom He bestowed upon His creations. Omnipotence is not the ability to break the rules of existence, but to bring about the most profound outcomes within the framework of those rules. This means that God, in His perfect wisdom, refrains from eliminating evil directly, because doing so would invalidate the purpose of the world He has designed. God's choice not to directly eliminate evil speaks to a higher principle, the importance of genuine choice and the potential for growth that comes from struggling with darkness. In a world where evil is erased, there would be no opportunity for love, redemption, or growth. These virtues require free will and the possibility of choosing against them. If the possibility of evil were completely removed, then goodness would be meaningless, for it would have no opposition to overcome. God's decision to allow evil to persist, not as a failure of omnipotence, but as a testament to His respect for the freedom of His creations, reveals a profound depth of love. True love, after all, cannot be forced. It must be chosen. Furthermore, eliminating evil would disrupt the cosmic order, where the presence of evil allows the forces of good to prove their strength and purpose. The path of righteousness, the journey of redemption, and the triumph of divine love over darkness are all made meaningful through the existence of evil. In this way, God's omnipotence is not the absence of struggle, but the ability to work through it, allowing His creation to find its way back to Him of its own free will. In the end, God's self-imposed limitations are not signs of weakness, but of wisdom, love, and a deep respect for the freedom of His creations. His omnipotence is not about doing anything, but about creating a world where meaning, growth, and the beauty of free will can flourish. Humanity, in the grand scheme of creation, holds a sacred trust. From the moment God breathed life into the first human, a responsibility was bestowed, one that reaches beyond mere survival or prosperity. Humanity was placed in a world of choice, of potential and peril, where the ability to choose between good and evil was not just a privilege, but a divine responsibility. This freedom of choice, while a gift, is also a profound burden, for it carries with it the weight of shaping the world, the course of history, and the very nature of one's soul. The presence of Satan in this cosmic drama serves as both a challenge and a catalyst. His role, though rooted in rebellion and opposition to God, provides the necessary tension that brings out the fullest expression of human will. Without opposition, without the choice to choose the darker path, the light of goodness would lack meaning. Just as fire's warmth is known only by contrast with the cold, goodness, love, and righteousness are made known through the presence of evil and the ability to choose against it. The responsibility of humanity, then, is not merely to accept the light, but to actively seek it, to choose it in the face of temptation, adversity, and darkness. It is through this struggle that humanity's character is forged. The cosmic drama unfolding with Satan's presence and influence offers a backdrop for this profound responsibility. Satan, as the tempter, the adversary, is an agent that challenges humanity to recognize the difference between fleeting desires and lasting truths. His power lies not in his ability to force actions upon humanity, but in his ability to sow seeds of doubt, to twist desires and motivations, and to encourage deviation from the divine path. This makes the human choice to reject evil all the more powerful, for it is not made under duress but with a deep awareness of the consequences and a conscious act of will. In this divine narrative, humanity is entrusted with the stewardship of the earth, with the freedom to shape the world in alignment with the values of justice, love, and goodness. But this freedom comes at a cost. The influence of Satan is ever present, whispering temptations that lead astray. Yet it is also the very agent that tests the authenticity of the human heart. In choosing to resist Satan's influence, humans are given the opportunity to demonstrate the true strength of their character, their ability to choose the divine will despite the allure of immediate gratification or power. Humanity's place in the cosmic drama is one of both vulnerability and empowerment. The struggle against evil, against the seductions of Satan, is a constant part of the human experience, but it is not one of inevitable defeat. The choice to do good over evil, to act with love instead of selfishness, defines the human journey. In this sacred trust, humanity finds its purpose not as passive observers in the divine story, but as active participants in shaping the unfolding narrative, capable of both great good and great harm. The responsibility lies in the choice, and it is through this choice that humanity aligns itself with the divine will, forging a path toward redemption and fulfillment. The fall of man is a pivotal moment in the grand narrative of creation, one that echoes throughout history and the spiritual journey of humanity. In the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve were placed in a state of innocence and harmony, where they were in perfect communion with God and with the natural world. They were gifted with free will, a divine attribute that allowed them to make choices that would shape their lives and their future. Yet it was this very gift that led to their downfall. Satan, who had long since fallen from grace and became the embodiment of opposition to God, recognized the vulnerability of the newly created humans. He saw in them not only the potential for greatness, but also the potential for rebellion. Through subtle whispers and lies, Satan tempted Eve, planting seeds of doubt in her mind about God's intentions. "Did God really say?" he asked, casting a shadow of uncertainty over the divine command. The simple act of questioning God's word, just as Lucifer once questioned his place in heaven, was enough to begin unraveling the harmony of Eden. Through Satan's manipulation, Eve came to see the forbidden fruit as a path to greater knowledge and autonomy, one that promised to make her like God. In her desire for something more, something beyond what was given to her, she took the fruit and ate, and then gave it to Adam, who followed her. This act of disobedience shattered the purity of creation. The consequences of their choice were immediate and far-reaching. The perfect communion between humanity and God was broken, and with it, the fabric of creation itself began to fray. Adam and Eve's eyes were opened, and they realized their nakedness. Shame replaced innocence, and fear replaced trust. The world that had once been a reflection of divine harmony now became a realm of suffering and separation. The first sin, driven by the temptation of Satan, introduced death, decay, and toil into the world. It was not merely a moral failing, but a cosmic rupture, an act that altered the course of creation for all eternity. Humanity was allowed to fall, not because God desired their destruction, but because free will, the very essence of their humanity, required it. Without the possibility of choosing against God, love would be hollow, and obedience would be mere programming. The fall was a consequence of their exercise of free will, a choice that defined humanity's capacity to choose righteousness and reject evil. Though God had warned Adam and Eve, the temptation proved too great. In their fall, they carried with them the potential for redemption and the promise of a future restoration, but this path would come at great cost. The fall of man also had profound implications for creation itself. The perfect order of the garden was marred, and the entire natural world began to reflect the consequences of humanity's disobedience. The ground would no longer yield fruit effortlessly. Thorns and thistles would infest the earth, and death would become an unavoidable reality. Yet, in this dark moment, there was a flicker of hope. The consequences of the fall set in motion the divine plan for redemption, a plan that would eventually restore the balance that was lost. Through the fall, humanity's story was irrevocably changed, and the struggle between good and evil, obedience and rebellion, would become the defining theme of human history. Suffering, an inescapable part of the human condition, has long been a source of mystery, pain, and reflection. It is through suffering that humanity begins to understand the depths of love, sacrifice, and faith. Without hardship, the beauty of love would be diminished, and the true meaning of sacrifice would remain elusive. The story of humanity, intertwined with suffering, reveals that it is not only through moments of joy and triumph that one comes to understand life's deepest meanings, but also through the darkest times of loss and anguish. In the grand cosmic drama, Satan plays a significant role in shaping human suffering. It was he who first introduced rebellion into creation, and with that rebellion came disorder, pain, and death. From the very beginning, he sowed seeds of doubt, tempting humanity to question their purpose and God's goodness. The fall of man was only the beginning. Satan's influence extends far beyond the initial act of disobedience. He constantly seeks to drive a wedge between humans and the divine, tempting them toward anger, hatred, greed, and despair. Each time a person succumbs to these temptations, they deepen their suffering, not only spiritually but emotionally and physically as well. Yet, it is in the struggle against suffering that humans begin to realize the transformative potential of their experiences. In the face of hardship, love becomes more profound. It is through sacrifice that the most meaningful connections are formed, as individuals choose to endure pain for the well-being of others. Faith, too, finds its roots in suffering. It is through the trial of fire that faith is tested, honed, and ultimately strengthened. In times of suffering, humans are faced with the choice to trust in a higher power, to believe that the pain is not without purpose, and that divine love will provide a way through the darkness. Satan's influence on suffering is not one of mere infliction, but of distortion. He seeks to manipulate suffering, twisting it into a tool that drives people away from the divine. Instead of leading to growth, he uses it to breed bitterness, resentment, and hopelessness. His aim is to sever the connection between humanity and the Creator, to turn suffering into a curse rather than a path to greater understanding. Through temptation and deception, Satan encourages humans to believe that their suffering is senseless and that they are abandoned in their pain. However, it is through God's love and grace that suffering can be redeemed. While Satan seeks to use suffering as a weapon of division, God uses it as a means of connection and transformation. It is in the midst of suffering that humanity can experience divine compassion, a love that does not turn away from pain but embraces it, transforming it into something sacred. The path of suffering, though dark and filled with trials, is ultimately a journey of spiritual awakening, a journey that leads to a deeper understanding of the divine, of love, and of faith. Through this suffering, humans are invited to find meaning and redemption, and in doing so, they fulfill their purpose in the divine plan. Evil, though often perceived as a force of destruction, holds a paradoxical place in the divine tapestry of creation. It is, in its essence, a necessary counterpart to the good. Without the existence of evil, the concept of goodness would lose its meaning and its value. Goodness, by definition, is a choice made in the face of an alternative, a decision that holds weight because there is a contrasting force that tempts or threatens its purity. In this way, evil serves as the foil to righteousness, giving it shape, substance, and significance. The existence of evil provides humanity with the freedom to choose, a fundamental aspect of God's design. Free will, as a divine gift, is incomplete without the possibility of turning away from good, of choosing darkness over light. It is only through the experience of evil and the choice to reject it in favor of goodness that the depth of human agency is fully realized. This freedom to choose is not only a test of moral character but also a reflection of God's love, a love that does not force compliance but invites genuine devotion. It is a love that allows for rejection, knowing that in that rejection, the opportunity for redemption and transformation remains. Evil also acts as a tool to reveal the nature of God's love. When humans encounter suffering, temptation, and the distortion of creation, they are presented with an opportunity to experience divine compassion and grace. In the face of evil, God's love is shown not as a passive force but as an active, redemptive power that meets humanity in their brokenness. It is through the presence of evil that God's mercy becomes tangible, for without the existence of suffering and sin, there would be no need for salvation, no need for Christ's sacrifice. The cross itself stands as the ultimate symbol of God's love meeting evil head-on, transforming it into the means of human redemption. In this divine paradox, evil serves as the backdrop against which the brilliance of God's love is revealed in its fullest glory. Evil, in its many forms, forces humanity to confront their limitations, their flaws, and their need for a higher purpose. It is through the struggle with evil that humans are given the opportunity to seek divine guidance, to lean on God's strength, and to learn the true nature of love. Without the existence of evil, there would be no awareness of the depths of goodness and no understanding of the power of grace. The struggle against evil shapes the human experience, refining souls, purging impurities, and ultimately drawing individuals closer to the divine. In this way, evil is not an end in itself but a means through which God's eternal plan unfolds. It is not a force that operates outside of divine control but one that is used, paradoxically, to fulfill the ultimate purpose of creation, to bring all things into alignment with God's perfect love. It is through the existence of evil that the magnitude of goodness is truly understood, and it is in the face of darkness that the light of divine love shines brightest. God's allowance of Satan's reign in certain aspects of the world can be a source of deep contemplation and confusion for many. Why would a benevolent and all-powerful God permit such a force to have any influence, let alone rule? The answer lies in understanding the divine narrative of free will, the unfolding of creation, and the necessity of allowing space for human growth and spiritual development. In the grand design, God is not absent from the reign of Satan, but rather permits it within a framework that serves a higher purpose. Satan's dominion, although seemingly expansive and oppressive at times, operates under the sovereignty of God. God, in his omniscience, allows the temporary existence of such darkness as part of the greater cosmic order. The world, as it currently exists, is a stage where the forces of light and darkness intersect, where humans, endowed with free will, must choose between the two. The allowance of Satan's influence is not an endorsement of evil, but a necessary condition for the cultivation of a deeper understanding of the divine, of morality, and of human capacity for goodness. The temporary nature of Satan's reign is also key to understanding God's design. In the eternal context, Satan's power is fleeting. The realm that Satan currently influences is part of a larger, transient story, one that will ultimately culminate in divine restoration. The apparent autonomy that Satan holds serves as a testing ground for humanity, a space where the choices made by each individual have profound spiritual significance. Without this space for testing, where would the opportunity for true love, righteousness, and wisdom lie? If there were no resistance to God's truth, no counterforce to challenge human faith and devotion, then the free will that defines humanity would lose its depth. It is in the choice between good and evil, between divine light and the temptations of darkness, that humans are shaped into beings who can understand and live out God's love. Satan's temporary authority is not, therefore, an indication of divine weakness or apathy. Instead, it reveals a profound trust in the free will of humanity. God allows this time of testing, knowing that the ultimate end of Satan's reign will come, and that through it, the eternal victory of light and truth will shine all the more brightly. The existence of evil is but a shadow, a temporary reality that ultimately points to the greater reality of divine goodness and grace. Through the struggle, humanity can know the depth of God's love, the importance of righteousness, and the significance of every choice made in faith. Satan's reign, however it manifests, is not eternal. It is a moment in time, woven into the larger tapestry of divine justice and love, a necessary part of the unfolding plan that will one day bring all things into their rightful place. As the story of creation and the struggle between good and evil unfolds, prophecies about the end times provide a glimpse into the divine resolution that awaits. These prophecies, embedded throughout sacred texts and spiritual teachings, outline a time when all will be made right, and Satan's reign, however long it has lasted, will finally come to an end. The understanding that Satan's ultimate defeat is part of God's divine plan offers hope and assurance to those who believe in the triumph of good over evil. Satan's role in the end times is often depicted as the final adversary, the one who gathers the forces of darkness in a last attempt to challenge the divine. His influence will reach its zenith as humanity stands at the precipice of the ultimate cosmic struggle. In many traditions, this final confrontation is referred to as the battle between good and evil, a moment of decisive action where the forces of light, led by the divine, will completely and utterly overcome the powers of darkness. It is a moment that signifies not only the end of Satan's reign but also the fulfillment of divine justice and mercy. Yet, the prophetic future also holds a deeper truth. Satan's defeat is not merely a moment of cosmic vengeance, but the culmination of a long and intricate plan that has been unfolding since the dawn of creation. The role Satan plays in these prophecies is paradoxical. While he embodies rebellion, his existence serves to bring about a greater understanding of divine goodness, truth, and love. It is through his opposition to God that the full measure of God's love is revealed, as humanity is offered the opportunity to choose between the light of the Creator and the darkness that Satan represents. The defeat of Satan, when it occurs, will not be the result of an external force beyond God's will. Instead, it will be the final act of a divine plan that has allowed Satan his time of influence, knowing all along that this period would come to its end. It is in this ultimate victory that the eternal and unchanging nature of God's justice and sovereignty is most clearly revealed. Satan's defeat is not simply the end of evil, it is the restoration of divine order, where all things return to their intended purpose. In this final resolution, the prophetic future offers a vision of hope for all who believe. The reign of Satan, no matter how formidable, is temporary, and his defeat is assured. It is part of the grand design, a necessary chapter in the story of creation, where humanity, by choosing righteousness, will fully understand the nature of God's love, justice, and mercy. Satan's role in this narrative is not one of ultimate victory, but one of necessary opposition that ultimately points to a greater truth: that God is sovereign, and his plan will unfold as it was meant to, bringing all things to their rightful and divine conclusion. The struggle between good and evil is not just a cosmic war of forces, it is a deeply personal and profound contest of wills. At the heart of this battle lies free will, a gift that God bestowed upon humanity, and all conscious beings. It is this freedom of choice that underpins the entire drama of creation. Without it, the very notion of good and evil, love and hate, justice and injustice would lose their meaning. Free will is the central force in the cosmic battle, for it is through the choices of beings, especially those made by humanity, that the nature of good and evil is defined and revealed. God, in His infinite wisdom, allowed the existence of free will as a means of elevating creation beyond mere obedience. For love to be genuine, for goodness to be true, it must be chosen freely. A world where every action was predetermined or controlled would lack the depth and beauty that comes from the free expression of will. This choice, however, also opens the door to the possibility of evil. Without the ability to choose between good and evil, free will would be meaningless. Satan's rebellion is rooted in this very choice. He, too, was given the ability to choose, and he chose to reject divine authority. His fall did not happen because he was forced into it, but because of his own desire to assert his will over God's. God cannot simply eradicate Satan without violating the very principle that makes creation meaningful: free will. To remove Satan would be to remove the possibility of choice altogether, for it would send the message that no being can truly exercise their own will outside of God's control. In this way, Satan's existence and his influence are not arbitrary. They are part of the grand design that allows for the choice to be made, a choice that defines the very essence of good and evil. If God were to eradicate Satan out of mere convenience or vengeance, he would undermine the purpose of free will, thus making the choice between good and evil no longer meaningful. The existence of evil in the world, as painful and disruptive as it may be, allows for the true testing of faith, character, and love. Free will, therefore, is not just a gift, it is also a responsibility. Every soul, every being, is faced with the task of choosing how to wield this power. Satan's role in the cosmic battle is not merely that of a villain to be vanquished, but as a necessary counterbalance that brings the choice between good and evil into sharp relief. To eliminate Satan without addressing the root cause of the choice he represents would be to bypass the very essence of the divine plan. The battle between good and evil, therefore, is not about the eradication of one side but the exercise of free will, where each individual's choice brings them closer to understanding and embodying divine love, justice, and truth. The concept of divine punishment is deeply intertwined with the nature of justice itself. In the divine framework, punishment is not about vengeance or a desire to destroy. It is meant to correct, to restore, and to guide creation toward its intended purpose. The idea of eternal punishment, often discussed in theological circles, brings with it significant implications for understanding both divine justice and mercy. To contemplate the annihilation or complete destruction of Satan, an entity who embodies rebellion and evil, is to challenge the very foundation of what divine punishment means. Divine justice operates on principles of balance, not on retribution or eradication. The idea of eternal punishment, particularly the notion of an infinite torment, is at odds with the nature of a God who is both merciful and loving. If God were to impose eternal suffering upon Satan, he would be acting contrary to his own nature, punishing without the possibility of restoration or change. Annihilation, in this sense, would also be incompatible with divine justice. For if God were to completely destroy Satan, it would represent the end of the possibility of redemption, which is not in alignment with the overarching narrative of love and forgiveness that governs God's relationship with creation. The idea of complete destruction also overlooks the reality that evil, in the divine order, is allowed to exist as part of the balance of free will and choice. Satan's role in the cosmic drama, although one of opposition to God, is not an arbitrary act of evil for evil's sake. It serves a purpose in the divine plan, a purpose that allows for the exercise of free will and the growth of beings capable of making moral choices. To destroy Satan entirely would be to erase a fundamental aspect of the divine order, the space for choice. It would mean that no being could ever fully exercise their will outside of divine will, thereby nullifying the possibility of true love, true goodness, and true justice. Furthermore, the concept of eternal punishment or annihilation of Satan fails to account for the notion of cosmic growth and the ultimate reconciliation of all things. God's justice is not limited to punishment alone, it extends to restoration. The divine plan is one of redemption, where all things are ultimately restored to their intended state. Satan, as an entity, is a product of rebellion and pride, but he is not beyond the possibility of transformation or change. While this change may not come in the form of an immediate return to the divine presence, it is essential to recognize that divine justice is a process, one that transcends immediate retribution and seeks to bring all things into harmony with the Creator's ultimate will. To completely annihilate Satan would be to deny the opportunity for this process to unfold, and thus, it would be incompatible with divine justice. The nature of God's justice is not to erase what is evil, but to provide a path for creation to choose good, to learn, and to ultimately grow toward perfection. In this light, Satan's role, however twisted and corrupted it may seem, fits into the broader narrative of divine justice and love, where punishment is never final but always part of a larger, restorative purpose. The creation of hell has long been a subject of theological debate, with many questioning its purpose and significance within the divine plan. In its essence, hell is not merely a place of torment, but a reflection of the consequences of choice and rebellion, particularly the choices made by beings like Satan. It is a realm that exists not as a contradiction to God's love, but as a necessary consequence of the free will he bestowed upon his creations. Hell represents the ultimate result of rejecting divine love and turning away from the path of righteousness, a place where the consequences of rebellion manifest in a tangible, eternal form. The concept of hell can be understood through the lens of divine justice and the freedom inherent in God's creation. God, in his omniscience, knew that with free will would come the potential for rebellion. Satan, the highest of the angels, chose pride over humility, turning against God in his desire to overthrow the divine order. The creation of hell was not an arbitrary act of punishment, but rather a necessary outcome of Satan's rejection of divine authority. It is a place that exists as a testament to the severe implications of this rebellion, a place where the consequences of choosing autonomy over divine will are fully realized. In this understanding, hell is not a space where God casts the fallen beings out of anger or hatred. Rather, it is a place where they reside because they have chosen it. It is a reflection of the distance that Satan and his followers have placed between themselves and the Creator. Hell, then, is not an act of eternal punishment but a state of separation, where those who rejected God's love are allowed to experience the consequences of their own decisions. The very nature of hell is defined by a lack of communion with God, a separation from the divine source of life and light. The existence of hell also highlights the importance of choice in the divine narrative. It is a place where beings who chose rebellion are allowed to face the reality of their decisions. In this sense, hell serves as a reminder of the importance of free will and the responsibility that comes with it. God, in his justice, does not force his creations to remain in his presence. Instead, he allows them the freedom to choose their own path. Hell is the inevitable destination for those who, like Satan, choose a path away from the divine. It serves as a permanent reminder of the cost of rebellion, a place where the consequences of choice are fully realized and where the fundamental truth of divine justice is made manifest. In this light, hell is not a place created out of malice, but a necessary part of the cosmic order. It exists as a space where the consequences of choice, rebellion, and pride are allowed to unfold eternally. It is the ultimate manifestation of the truth that in the divine system, every choice carries weight, and those who choose against God's love must face the consequences of their actions. The second coming of Christ is one of the most profound and awaited events in Christian theology, representing the fulfillment of divine promises and the ultimate triumph of good over evil. In this final chapter of human history, Christ returns not only as the Savior, but as the righteous judge who will bring about the defeat of Satan and all the forces of evil that have opposed God's will. This return is not just the fulfillment of prophecy. It is the culmination of the cosmic struggle that has played out throughout time. A struggle that has seen Satan's influence permeate human history, tempting and deceiving, leading countless souls astray. Yet, in the end, Satan's power will be broken, and his rebellion against God will come to its final and inescapable conclusion. Christ's role in the ultimate defeat of evil is both redemptive and judicial. Through his death on the cross, Christ already secured the victory over sin and death, offering salvation to all who would choose to follow him. His resurrection was the first step in this great victory, showing that death and evil do not have the final say. The second coming, however, marks the moment when this victory is made complete. Satan, who has long been the deceiver, the accuser, and the adversary, will finally face the full measure of God's justice. His time of influence will come to an end. And with Christ's return, the ultimate defeat of evil is realized. This is not a battle that will be fought on the terms Satan has set, but one in which Christ, as the embodiment of divine authority, will restore all things to their rightful order. The theological implications of Satan's role in the end times are profound. For centuries, Satan has played a pivotal role in the testing and temptation of humanity, influencing rulers, nations, and individuals to defy God's will. His reign has been one of deception, where he has twisted truth, sown discord, and sought to keep humanity in spiritual bondage. However, in the end, his role as the antagonist to God's plan will be exposed for what it truly is, a futile rebellion against the Creator. Satan's ultimate fate, as described in Scripture, is one of destruction, as he and his followers are cast into the lake of fire, a place of eternal separation from God. This final act is not a demonstration of God's vengeance, but a necessary part of the cosmic justice that restores balance to the universe. It is the end of the rebellion, the restoration of God's divine order, and the full realization of his kingdom. The second coming of Christ, then, is not just a moment of victory for believers, but a declaration that evil has no permanent place in God's creation. It is the moment when God's justice is fully realized, and Satan, the source of all rebellion, is finally cast down. This event holds profound meaning for humanity, offering hope that no matter how pervasive evil may seem, there is an end to it, a future where God's reign will be unchallenged and all creation will be made new. The mystery of evil's persistence despite God's infinite power is one that has confounded theologians, philosophers, and believers alike for centuries. If God is all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-good, then why does evil seem to endure in the world? Why is Satan allowed to continue his influence over humanity, sowing chaos, deception, and suffering? The answer lies not in a failure of divine power, but in the intricate nature of free will, the purpose of creation, and the divine understanding of time and redemption. From the very beginning, God granted humanity the gift of free will. This gift, though a source of immense possibility, also carries the inherent risk of choosing against God. If God were to eliminate evil entirely, he would have to remove the possibility of free will itself. The very nature of free will means that humanity has the capacity to choose whether to love or to reject, to follow divine will or to rebel. Evil exists, in part, because humanity has the ability to choose it. Satan's influence, his temptation of humanity, serves as a constant reminder of the choice that every person must make, to align themselves with the divine or to follow a path of destruction. God's decision to allow evil to persist is also rooted in his greater plan for redemption. The existence of evil, though tragic, has allowed for the profound realization of divine goodness, mercy, and love. If evil had never entered the world, if the consequences of disobedience had never been felt, how would humanity ever truly know the depth of grace, forgiveness, and the redemptive power of God's love? It is through suffering, through the battle between good and evil, that humanity learns to rely on God's strength and understand the true value of righteousness. Evil, in this sense, becomes a backdrop against which the beauty of God's love and the importance of choosing goodness are made clear. Moreover, God, in His infinite wisdom, understands the end of the story. While evil's persistence in the world seems perplexing in the short term, God sees the long arc of history, the eventual culmination of all things in the fullness of time. Satan's influence, though real and powerful, is ultimately temporary. The power of evil, though it may seem overwhelming at times, is limited in scope. It is allowed to persist for a season, but the final victory belongs to God. In the end, evil will be defeated, and all things will be made new. The persistence of evil is not a sign of divine impotence, but rather an expression of God's ultimate plan to bring about a greater good one that could not exist without the presence of evil and the free choices made by humanity. This mystery of evil's persistence, then, is not one of contradiction but of divine foresight. God allows Satan's influence to persist because He knows that through this struggle, humanity will come to understand the depth of love, the reality of choice, and the ultimate victory that awaits those who choose the path of righteousness. In the end, evil's persistence is a temporary condition in a cosmic story that will forever end in the triumph of good. The concept of divine non-interference is a profound and often difficult aspect of God's interaction with creation. It hinges on the essential gift of free will, a cornerstone of the divine plan. Free will, granted to every being from the highest angel to the lowest of humanity, is not just a feature of existence. It is the very framework that allows creation to be meaningful. If God were to interfere directly and continually with the actions of Satan, or any created being, He would be violating the fundamental nature of free will. This law of non-interference is not a limitation of God's power, but a deliberate and purposeful act to preserve the integrity of choice in creation. The nature of free will demands that, in order for it to be truly free, it must not be coerced or overridden by divine intervention. If God were to directly intervene every time Satan tempted, misled, or caused harm, He would, in essence, nullify the free will He so generously bestowed. For love to be authentic, for righteousness to have meaning, the capacity to choose evil must exist alongside the choice for good. This is not a sign of divine weakness but of divine respect for the creatures He has created. Love cannot be genuine if it is forced. It must come freely from the heart of the individual. Thus, the law of divine non-interference ensures that all choices, even those made by Satan, are allowed to play out within the bounds of creation's free will. This law of non-interference also underpins the relationship between God and Satan. While Satan's rebellion and influence continue to affect creation, God does not constantly intervene to stop him. The presence of evil is allowed because its existence is inextricably tied to the existence of choice. If Satan's actions were permanently checked by divine power, there would be no genuine space for human beings to choose their path, to grow, or to learn. The purpose of creation is not to force creatures into predetermined outcomes, but to allow them to exercise their autonomy, learn, and choose to walk the path of righteousness. In this way, even Satan's actions have a role in the divine plan, not as a good force, but as a necessary counterbalance to the free will that enables all beings to choose good. By not directly interfering in the actions of Satan, God respects the laws of creation that He Himself has established. These laws allow beings to exercise free will and grow in spiritual maturity. However, while God may not directly intervene to stop Satan, He is not indifferent. God works within the framework of free will, guiding, teaching, and preparing the hearts of those who choose good. And in the fullness of time, he will bring an end to Satan's reign, not through coercion, but through the fulfillment of divine justice. The law of divine non-interference, then, is not a limitation of power, but an affirmation of the divine respect for choice, love, and the integrity of creation. The battle for the soul is one of the most profound struggles that each individual faces. It is not merely a cosmic clash between good and evil, but a deeply personal war that plays out in the hearts and minds of humanity. Satan, with his cunning and deceit, seeks to influence and lead astray. His whispers infiltrate the human soul, sowing seeds of doubt, fear, and temptation. However, his power is not absolute, and it is in the hands of the individual to engage in the fight against his influence. This battle is not one that can be won for us, but one that must be fought within the depth of our own will. The essence of this struggle lies in free will, which, although a gift, also carries great responsibility. Satan's influence is pervasive, but it is not coercive. He cannot compel anyone to sin. He can only offer the temptation, the allure of power, pleasure, or self-interest. In this way, the battle for the soul is a contest of choices, and each person has the power to choose what path to take. The enemy may tempt, may mislead, but it is the individual's will that must resist, that must stand firm in the face of darkness. This is where true strength lies, not in being immune to temptation, but in choosing righteousness despite its presence. The nature of the soul's battle against evil requires internal fortitude. It is not enough to acknowledge the existence of evil or to recognize the allure of Satan's promises. The true challenge comes in the moment of choice, when the individual must fight their own inner desires, fears, and doubts. This internal conflict is where the real battle occurs. It is not fought with external weapons, but with the strength of will and the clarity of purpose. It is the ability to choose love, to choose light, even when darkness seems overwhelming. In this, humans become active participants in their salvation, engaging in a partnership with divine grace, using their free will as the tool with which they fight. For this battle to be effective, it requires a constant state of awareness and vigilance. The soul is constantly bombarded by external forces, whether through temptation, suffering, or the world's chaotic nature. Yet, within the heart of every person, there remains a divine spark, a connection to the Creator that can guide and protect. This is why the battle for the soul is not just about fighting Satan. It is about aligning oneself with the good, the true, and the beautiful. It is a fight to maintain one's integrity and spiritual focus in the face of an ever-present adversary. In the end, the victory over Satan is not about being invulnerable to temptation, but about rising above it with the strength of one's will. Each decision to turn away from evil, each moment of resisting the pull of darkness, is a victory. And while the battle may never cease in this life, each choice made towards good brings humanity closer to the ultimate triumph over evil. This is the essence of human agency, the ability to choose light over darkness, to fight the battle for the soul, armed with the power of free will. Satan's challenge to God's authority is not just a rebellion, but a constant and persistent defiance that echoes through the fabric of creation. From the moment of his fall, when pride led him to desire autonomy, Satan has positioned himself as an adversary to the divine order. His actions are not limited to an isolated event, but a continual struggle against God's absolute rule. This rebellion is not simply a challenge to God's sovereignty. It is an affront to the very essence of divine power and authority. Satan questions the righteousness of God's command, the justice of his decisions, and the truth of his ways. It is precisely through this challenge that the potential for spiritual growth within creation is found. A universe where all is perfect and unquestioned may seem harmonious, but it lacks the depth of understanding that comes from conflict. Satan's opposition forces creation to grapple with fundamental questions about purpose, morality, and the nature of freedom. It is easy to accept authority when it is unquestioned, but true growth comes through the exercise of free will, the ability to question, to rebel, and ultimately, to choose what is right. The presence of Satan as an opposer allows creation to evolve beyond blind submission to divine will, into a meaningful relationship with God, rooted in trust and understanding. The cosmic struggle is, in essence, a battle for the soul of creation. Without Satan's challenge, the meaning of good and evil, right and wrong, would be hollow. The existence of evil serves as a backdrop against which the beauty of divine love and goodness can be fully appreciated. It is through the tension of this opposition that creation learns the significance of righteousness, the value of justice, and the purpose of grace. Without the challenge to God's authority, these concepts would remain abstract, lacking the depth and significance that come from actively choosing good in the face of evil. Satan's role is paradoxical. He is the instrument of opposition. But without his defiance, creation's capacity for growth and moral development would stagnate. The challenge that Satan provides forces the creatures of creation, humanity, in particular, to step up, to choose, and to wrestle with the consequences of their choices. It is through this challenge that spiritual strength is cultivated. Every temptation resisted, every moral decision made in the face of evil, contributes to the spiritual maturity of creation. In this light, Satan's challenge is not a disruption of God's plan, but an essential element of it. Creation's spiritual growth depends on the freedom to choose, and Satan's rebellion highlights the necessity of that freedom. It is not a flaw in God's design that Satan opposes him. Rather, it is a reflection of the dynamic tension that exists between free will and divine authority. Without the challenge, there would be no meaningful path to understanding God's ultimate truth and love. It is through overcoming the adversary that creation's journey towards spiritual enlightenment and unity with the divine reaches its fullest potential. The patience of God in allowing Satan's existence is a profound aspect of the divine narrative, one that speaks volumes about the nature of God's character and his ultimate plan for creation. It is easy to view Satan's prolonged presence as a flaw or an oversight in divine design, but in truth, it is a reflection of God's willingness to allow creation to unfold according to its own rhythm, even when it involves moments of conflict, rebellion, and suffering. God's patience is not a sign of weakness or a lack of control. Rather, it is a deliberate choice to grant freedom, the freedom to choose, the freedom to grow, and the freedom to learn. God, in his infinite wisdom, understands that the universe he created must operate within the framework of choice, and that choice cannot be meaningful if it is devoid of opposition. Satan's continued existence, though fraught with danger and turmoil, is essential to the greater purpose of creation. Through the tension of good and evil, light and darkness, the world learns the importance of righteousness, the necessity of grace, and the power of love. If God were to simply eradicate Satan, it would not only interrupt the flow of history but also diminish the significance of humanity's free will and the lessons that come with navigating a world filled with choices. The divine patience in allowing Satan to persist also highlights the nature of God's relationship with his creation. He does not force his will upon us. Rather, he patiently watches, guiding us through the consequences of our decisions while still offering the opportunity for redemption. This long-suffering nature of God allows creation to mature in its understanding of the complexities of good and evil. It is only through the constant testing and refining of the human soul that the true depth of divine love and wisdom can be revealed. Patience, in this sense, becomes a form of divine love, a love that does not seek to control, but to foster growth, transformation, and understanding. Moreover, God's patience serves as a lesson for humanity. In a world that often demands immediate results, instant answers, and swift resolutions, the patience of God invites us to slow down and understand that true change, true spiritual growth, and true redemption take time. Just as God allows Satan's existence to serve a larger purpose, so too does he allow us the space to wrestle with our own challenges, to confront our flaws, and to ultimately make choices that bring us closer to his divine will. The lesson of patience is woven into the very fabric of the divine narrative, teaching us that the journey towards spiritual enlightenment is not one of immediate perfection, but of gradual progress. In the end, God's patience is not merely a passive waiting, but an active force that allows the fullness of creation to unfold. It is a patience that gives space for the triumph of good over evil, a patience that grants us the time and opportunity to understand the depth of his love, and a patience that ultimately guides us toward the fulfillment of his divine purpose for all of creation. The story of the forbidden fruit is one of the most poignant and paradoxical elements in the spiritual narrative of creation. It represents the first test of humanity's free will, a moment that set into motion the entire trajectory of the human experience. On the surface, it is a tale of disobedience, the consequences of choosing knowledge over divine command. But beneath this lies a deeper, more complex symbolism. The fruit, which was placed off limits to Adam and Eve, becomes a powerful symbol of the desire for understanding, for autonomy, and for the pursuit of knowledge that exists outside of divine provision. The act of eating it, influenced by Satan's subtle temptation, marks a pivotal moment in the cosmic drama, one that introduces the duality of human existence, the ability to choose, to transgress, and to bear the consequences of those choices. Satan's role in this event is not merely that of a deceiver, but a catalyst for the unfolding of humanity's spiritual journey. His temptation does not simply consist of a direct urging to defy God, but an invitation to explore the boundaries of knowledge, to step beyond the divine instruction and seek something more. In his own rebellion, Satan embodies the desire to surpass divine limitations, to reach for something more than what is allotted. He becomes the instigator of humanity's first conscious choice, the choice to seek wisdom in a way that was never meant to be accessed. By tempting Eve to eat the fruit, Satan is not simply introducing sin, but giving humanity the opportunity to experience the tension between desire and discipline, between freedom and its consequences. The forbidden fruit symbolizes the allure of knowledge, the innate human curiosity to understand the world beyond its immediate reach. In eating it, Adam and Eve opened their eyes to a reality that had been hidden from them, a reality in which they gained self-awareness, knowledge of good and evil, and a deeper understanding of their own existence. However, this newfound knowledge comes at a cost. What was once a state of innocent communion with God becomes a fragmented relationship, one where the innocence of Eden is lost, and the weight of consequence takes its place. Yet, this paradoxical journey into the realm of forbidden knowledge is not without purpose. Through the fall, humanity begins its spiritual evolution, gaining awareness of its own capacity for choice, for both good and evil. It is a painful awakening, but one that ultimately serves to deepen the human understanding of divine grace, redemption, and the complexities of spiritual growth. The concept of forbidden knowledge in this context becomes less about a singular transgression and more about the nature of spiritual journey itself. The fall, driven by the forbidden fruit, marks the beginning of humanity's path toward understanding the deeper mysteries of existence. The spiritual journey is rarely one of simple obedience. It often requires grappling with forbidden truths, understanding the tension between wisdom and ignorance, and learning the consequences of those choices. In the grand design of creation, this paradoxical act serves as a tool for the unfolding of humanity's relationship with the Divine One that, though fraught with pain and suffering, leads ultimately to a deeper and more profound connection to the Creator. Thus, the forbidden fruit and Satan's role in the fall are not merely about the introduction of sin into the world. They are integral to the spiritual narrative of growth, understanding, and the quest for redemption. The forbidden knowledge that humanity gains serves as both a burden and a gift, setting the stage for the continual process of spiritual awakening and transformation. Faith, in its purest form, is not simply a belief that exists in the absence of doubt. It is the unwavering trust in something greater than oneself, a trust that persists even in the face of adversity. However, for faith to become genuine, it must be tested, refined, and proven through the trials of life. This is where Satan plays a critical role in the divine narrative, not as a mere antagonist, but as an instrument of testing and challenge. In tempting, accusing, and opposing humanity, Satan becomes the catalyst for the spiritual growth of individuals, offering them the opportunity to confront their deepest doubts and fears, ultimately leading them to a deeper understanding of their faith. Without trials, faith would remain shallow and untested, like a fragile seed that never experiences the weight of the soil. It would remain an abstract belief, unchallenged by the complexities of the world. Satan, in his opposition, becomes the force that challenges this faith, tempting individuals to turn away from their trust in the divine and to seek their own solutions. He pushes humanity toward moments of despair, anger, and confusion, offering shortcuts and promises of power, control, and understanding. These temptations create a tension in the soul, forcing people to choose. Will they remain steadfast in their faith, or will they surrender to the allure of easier answers? The testing of faith is not just about overcoming external challenges, but also about confronting the internal struggle. It is within these moments of difficulty and temptation that the true nature of a person's faith is revealed. When all seems lost, when doubt clouds the mind, the choice to remain faithful is what turns a fleeting belief into a profound conviction. The presence of Satan as the one who brings these trials is not a reflection of a cruel and malevolent force, but rather the necessary challenge that brings clarity to the human soul. The fire of temptation purifies, removing the impurities of selfishness, pride, and fear, and leaving behind the enduring strength of genuine faith. This testing is not just for the individual, but serves a larger purpose in the cosmic plan. Faith that is untested cannot bear the weight of the struggles ahead, nor can it contribute to the larger narrative of redemption. Through the trials orchestrated by Satan's influence, the faithful learn not only about themselves but also about the true nature of the divine. They come to understand that faith is not the absence of doubt or struggle, but the ability to hold fast to the belief that God's will is good, even when the world seems to oppose it. It is in these trials that humanity learns to surrender control, trust in divine timing, and ultimately embrace the deeper, more meaningful relationship with God that faith fosters. In this light, Satan's role becomes indispensable, not because he is inherently good, but because his opposition to God serves as the refining fire for the human soul. Without Satan's trials, humanity would never come to fully understand the depth of its faith or its capacity for trust. The struggle, though painful, becomes the means through which faith is tested, strengthened, and made genuine, allowing humanity to stand firm in their belief, no matter the storm that rages around them. The end of Satan's reign is not merely the conclusion of his individual power, but the fulfillment of a divine narrative that has been unfolding since the beginning of creation. It is a culmination of the cosmic battle between good and evil, a moment prophesied in ancient scriptures and anticipated by both the faithful and the fallen. This defeat, however, is not simply an end. It marks a new beginning for humanity and the entire creation, the restoration of harmony and order in a world long overshadowed by the corruption of sin. Satan's reign, though long and marked by suffering, rebellion, and temptation, serves a crucial purpose in the divine plan. His rule over the hearts and minds of humanity, through deception and evil, creates the space for free will to truly exist. Without the presence of opposition, the choice between good and evil would be meaningless. It is in the face of Satan's temptations and the pain he inflicts that the strength of human faith is revealed and refined. His influence, though dark and destructive, provides the opportunity for humans to choose righteousness, to overcome evil, and to demonstrate their trust in God despite all that stands against them. Yet, even in this struggle, Satan is not beyond the reach of divine justice. His ultimate defeat is not an arbitrary event, but a part of the greater purpose of God's creation, a plan designed to restore all things to their intended perfection. The victory over Satan, foretold in prophecies, is a necessary part of the redemption story. Through his defeat, God's righteousness is made manifest, showing that evil, no matter how powerful it seems, cannot stand against the eternal authority of the divine. It is not simply a triumph over an individual being, but over the very forces that seek to distort and corrupt creation. The end of Satan's reign is woven into God's plan not as a final act of destruction, but as the necessary step toward the full realization of divine justice. In that moment, evil will no longer have the power to tempt, deceive, or destroy. The world will be restored, free from the bondage of sin, and humanity will stand in the light of a new creation, one where evil no longer taints the good. This defeat signals the final victory of God's love and the ultimate reconciliation of all things. In the absence of Satan's influence, the fullness of divine peace will be revealed, and humanity will experience the eternal reward of having chosen faith, even in the face of darkness. For humanity, Satan's defeat will mean liberation. It will be the closing of a painful chapter and the beginning of an era of peace and unity with the Creator. This event, while tragic in its necessity, will bring to light the glory of God's plan for creation, where all things are made new, free from the taint of evil. The defeat of Satan, then, is not just a moment of cosmic judgment, but the realization of divine love and justice, the restoration of all things to their intended state of goodness, truth, and beauty. Cosmic justice is the ultimate equilibrium of the universe, where all actions, from the smallest thought to the grandest cosmic battle, are measured and weighed by divine truth. It is a force beyond human understanding, working through time and space to ensure that good is ultimately restored and evil is confronted. The struggle between good and evil, played out in countless realms, is not merely a matter of opposing forces, but part of a larger divine order that upholds balance, integrity, and the sanctity of free will. In this cosmic drama, the eventual victory of good over evil is assured, but this victory must not come at the cost of the very system that makes it possible, justice itself. The death of Satan, as many might envision, would seem to mark the definitive victory over evil. However, to erase him from existence would disrupt the intricate balance of justice that allows good to triumph. If Satan were to be completely annihilated or removed from creation, the foundational principle of free will, the ability to choose between good and evil, would be compromised. Justice, in its truest sense, is not about simple retribution or the elimination of all opposition. It is about giving all beings the opportunity to choose, to learn, and to grow. For the divine plan to unfold as intended, the role of the adversary must persist. Satan's existence, while wicked, serves a higher purpose in this grand scheme. In the narrative of cosmic justice, every being, regardless of their alignment, is allowed to exist and act within the boundaries of free will. The creation of Satan, his fall, and his role as the adversary were not arbitrary. They were necessary for the unfolding of humanity's moral journey. Without the presence of evil, the exercise of choosing good would lose its meaning. Humanity's faith, love, and devotion to the divine would not be tested or proven. It would remain a passive, unquestioned acceptance. In this sense, Satan's existence is a paradox. His very rebellion ensures the possibility for the triumph of good, for the genuine pursuit of righteousness. To obliterate Satan would be to deny the reality of choice, for it would create a universe devoid of opposition. The notion of divine justice is not only about the triumph of good over evil, but about respecting the space in which that victory is earned. It is in the contest between light and darkness that the purity of divine love is revealed. The death of Satan would strip away the very conditions that allow goodness to shine in its full glory. Evil, therefore, is not eliminated but held in tension, creating the environment where divine justice can reach its culmination. The balance is delicate but essential, as it ensures that good is not forced upon the universe, but chosen freely, eternally tested, and ultimately triumphant. In the final chapters of the cosmic struggle, Satan's defiance reaches its zenith, as his rebellion takes on an intensity more desperate and chaotic than ever before. Though his influence over creation has already caused immeasurable suffering and disruption, he cannot resist one last act of defiance, one final attempt to break free from the chains of divine order. The dark rebellion that began in the heavens, born from pride and the desire for autonomy, now takes its final form, an all-out assault on God's authority and the divine order. Satan, embittered and consumed by his own failures, rallies his forces and prepares for a war that he knows he cannot win. His rebellion, once born of ambition and pride, now stems from a place of hopelessness, driven not by the belief in victory, but by an unrelenting need to prove that he is untamable, that no matter the cost, he can defy the Creator. Satan's final stand against the divine is not merely an act of rebellion, but a tragic moment of self-destruction. As he leads his forces into battle, he knows that his fate is sealed. The cosmic justice that governs all creation cannot allow him to continue, and the divine plan, now nearing its culmination, cannot accommodate his defiance any longer. But even as he faces the inevitable, Satan does not seek redemption or reconciliation. He chooses to resist, even if resistance only brings about his ultimate undoing. His rebellion, however, is not one of mere power. It is an assertion of his will against the divine purpose, an expression of his refusal to accept that which he has been made to endure, the knowledge that he cannot win, yet still must act as though he can. The consequences of this final stand are immense, not only for Satan but for the entire universe. As he wages his battle, his followers, once his loyal servants, are torn between the promise of victory and the undeniable truth that their master has already lost. The forces of darkness, once vast and seemingly invincible, are now collapsing under the weight of their own futility. The rebellion becomes a tragedy of cosmic proportions, as Satan's final act of defiance only brings about the realization of his utter isolation. His desire to overturn the divine plan, to bring chaos and suffering into the heart of creation, is thwarted by the very laws he tried to break. The forces of good, having long anticipated this final rebellion, are ready for the battle and rise to meet it with the full power of divine order behind them. In the end, Satan's final rebellion becomes the culmination of his long, tortured existence. His refusal to bow before divine justice, his endless pursuit of a hollow victory, leads only to his utter defeat. The universe witnesses the final act of defiance, but the divine plan remains steadfast. The rebellion ends not in destruction, but in the reaffirmation of the divine will, a final testament to the sovereignty of God and the unbreakable nature of the cosmic order. Satan, once the most powerful of all created beings, is brought low, his reign of terror finally extinguished. The world, at long last, is free from his influence, and the universe begins to heal, forever marked by the lessons learned in the wake of his defiance. The angels, messengers of the divine, stand as the constant opposition to Satan's malevolent forces. Their role in the cosmic balance is pivotal, for they are entrusted with the task of defending the divine order and carrying out God's will. Though they wield great power and grace, angels are not warriors in the same sense that one might imagine, for their mission is not one of conquest through violence, but of preservation through vigilance and obedience. Angels cannot destroy Satan outright, not because they lack the strength, but because their purpose is not to enforce divine justice through destruction, but to resist evil wherever it arises. Their task is subtle, layered in the complexity of divine law. Angels oppose Satan's actions, but they do so within the constraints set by the Creator. They do not engage in battle out of a desire for power or vengeance, but out of a commitment to the divine order and the will of God. This distinction is essential in understanding their role. They are not agents of annihilation, but rather protectors of divine purpose. Satan, in his rebellion, may have set himself against God, but in his rebellion, he is not directly erased or consumed by the angels. The divine law that governs the universe does not permit such an outcome. The role of angels is to serve the divine, not to execute final judgment. They are bound by the very will of the Creator, which forbids them from destroying Satan and thus violating the sacred balance of free will and cosmic justice. The angels' opposition is more profound than mere conflict. It is a manifestation of divine patience and a commitment to preserving the freedom of creation. They guard the boundaries between the spiritual and the material, defending humanity from Satan's influence while respecting the divine plan. In this sense, they are both shield and sword, but not in a physical sense. Their resistance is spiritual. Their strength lies in their unwavering devotion to the Creator's will, and their ability to stand firm against the powers of darkness that seek to unravel God's work. The struggle, then, is not one of direct confrontation but a quiet defiance, an upholding of divine order even when that order is challenged. Satan's reign of terror can never be allowed to break the balance of creation, but the angels do not seek to destroy him outright. They stand as witnesses to the corruption he sows and the destruction he seeks to bring. But they do not wield their power to obliterate him. They know, as messengers of the divine, that the final judgment will come not through their hands, but through the will of God. Until that day, their mission remains unchanged: to oppose Satan, to guard the sanctity of creation, and to carry out the will of the one who is above all. In the parable of the weeds, Jesus speaks of a field where both wheat and weeds grow together, and while the servants wish to pull up the weeds, the master insists that they wait until the harvest. This story, rich in its symbolism, reveals much about the nature of good and evil in the world. The field represents the world, and the wheat symbolizes the righteous, while the weeds represent those who align themselves with evil, most notably Satan and his followers. The message is clear: good and evil must coexist for a time, woven into the fabric of creation until the moment of final judgment. Satan's role in the parable is central, as it is through his influence that the weeds, or evil, are allowed to grow among the wheat. Just as the master in the parable allows the weeds to remain in the field, so too does God permit evil to persist in the world. The reason for this is not a sign of weakness or lack of power on God's part, but a reflection of divine wisdom. If the weeds were uprooted prematurely, the wheat, too, would be harmed. The root system of both is entangled, suggesting that the growth of good and evil in this world is so intertwined that it is difficult to remove one without damaging the other. This delicate balance serves as a metaphor for the coexistence of righteousness and sin, showing that evil, while a disruptive force, serves a necessary role in the grand scheme of creation. The master's decision to wait until the harvest for the final separation is also a statement of divine patience. God does not rush to judgment, and neither does he seek to destroy evil prematurely. This patience allows for the full development of both good and evil, giving every being the opportunity to choose their path. For humans, this means that the choice to follow good or evil is not forced upon them. They are free to live in the world, to grow, and to learn from both the blessings and the burdens of creation. Ultimately, the parable reminds us that while evil exists, it is not without purpose in the divine narrative. God permits it to flourish for a time, not as a sign of approval, but as a necessary condition for the ultimate separation of the righteous from the wicked. The day will come, as the parable tells us, when the weeds will be gathered up and burned, and the wheat will be gathered into the barn. This separation, however, will not come until the appointed time, for only then will the full weight of good and evil be made manifest. Until that day, both must coexist in the world, as part of God's plan to allow free will to flourish and to prepare the hearts of humanity for the final judgment. The restoration of creation, long promised and eagerly awaited, marks the fulfillment of divine intention, a return to a state of harmony where all things are as they were meant to be. The final defeat of Satan, though a momentous and inevitable event, will not merely be an end to evil, but the beginning of something new, something that transcends the limitations of a fallen world. Satan, in his rebellion, became a catalyst for growth, though not in the way he would have intended. Through the presence of evil and the choices it presented, creation was given the opportunity to mature, to understand the depth of its own potential for both good and evil. This paradox, how evil can lead to growth, becomes evident as we look to the final restoration. In the grand scheme of things, Satan's rebellion and his influence on the world were never outside God's sovereignty. From the very beginning, the divine plan accounted for the existence of evil, for the struggle that would occur within creation. Humanity, in its ability to choose between good and evil, would gain a deeper understanding of virtue, righteousness, and the nature of love through this very conflict. Satan's presence, in many ways, allowed humanity to know what they would fight for, to stand firm in their conviction, and to seek divine guidance with greater intensity. However, with the defeat of Satan, the true restoration of creation will unfold. The world, once marred by the scars of rebellion, will be healed. The twisted, broken systems that emerged from the influence of evil will be made whole again. All that was fractured, both spiritually and physically, will be restored to its original glory. The earth, under the weight of sin and corruption, will breathe again in the purity of divine intention. The relationships between humanity and the rest of creation will be renewed, where harmony and balance once again reign. In the afterglow of this transformation, Satan's role as a catalyst for growth will become clear. Though he sought to destroy, his actions ultimately led to the maturation of creation. The evil he sowed forced humanity to look beyond the present world and seek the eternal, to reach for the divine. Creation, having known both good and evil, will now be able to enjoy the fullness of goodness without the shadow of corruption looming over it. It will be a time of peace, a time of flourishing, where all things work together in perfect unity. Thus, the defeat of Satan is not the end of God's story, but the glorious beginning of a new chapter. A world once devastated by the effects of sin and rebellion will be restored to its intended state, where creation is healed, and humanity lives in the fullness of God's presence. In this restored world, the memory of evil will serve not as a source of fear, but as a reminder of how far creation has come and how much God's love can overcome. Goodness, in its purest form, is eternal. It transcends time, boundless and unchanging, an essence woven into the very fabric of existence. For this reason, evil, despite its presence in the world, cannot overpower the eternal nature of good. God, in his infinite wisdom, does not seek to eradicate evil through force or destruction, for such an act would be contrary to the very nature of goodness. Goodness is not simply the absence of evil, but the active, unyielding force that persists and endures despite all attempts to suppress it. The divine truth, by its very nature, cannot be contained or erased. It exists beyond the reach of evil, remaining steadfast through every trial, every conflict, and every moment of temptation. The coexistence of good and evil is not a contradiction but a necessary aspect of divine truth. Through this interplay, the nature of good is revealed in all its glory. It is only when contrasted with evil that goodness shines in its brightest form, illustrating its power, its purity, and its unassailable strength. If evil were eradicated instantly, there would be no means for humanity to fully understand the depth of goodness or the value of choosing righteousness. The presence of evil provides the context in which good can be chosen, and in the choosing, the nature of divine truth is made evident. God does not destroy evil because, in his plan, the very presence of evil serves a higher purpose. Evil is not an obstacle to the ultimate triumph of good, but a catalyst for its revelation. By allowing evil to persist, God is creating the conditions in which the eternal nature of good can be fully appreciated. It is through the struggle, the choice, and the eventual victory of good over evil that the true nature of divine love, justice, and grace is made known. Without evil, there would be no test of faith, no true expression of free will, and no opportunity for the full realization of God's nature in his creation. In this eternal dance between good and evil, the truth of divine goodness remains unshaken. Evil may cause suffering, pain, and confusion, but it cannot extinguish the light of truth. In the grand scheme of creation, evil is temporary, but good is forever. The coexistence of good and evil does not diminish the nature of goodness, but allows it to be fully realized, tested, and understood. The eternal nature of good is not just a concept to be grasped in theory, but a living truth that shapes and defines the universe. A truth that will ultimately triumph, not through annihilation, but through its endurance and perseverance in the face of darkness. Satan's existence, though often viewed as a force of destruction and rebellion, plays a critical role in the moral and spiritual evolution of humanity. His presence in the world is not merely a force of chaos, but a challenge to humanity's ability to grow, learn, and ultimately choose the path of righteousness. In this grand design, Satan serves as a necessary antagonist, opposing the divine order in a way that invites humanity to explore its capacity for choice, responsibility, and understanding. Without the presence of opposition, there would be no true test of virtue, no distinction between right and wrong. The struggle against the forces of darkness pushes individuals to seek deeper wisdom, to refine their own beliefs, and to come to understand the nature of their own souls. Humanity's growth toward divine understanding is not a simple, linear journey, but a process filled with challenges, obstacles, and moments of deep moral questioning. It is through facing and overcoming these challenges that individuals can grow spiritually, discerning between what is fleeting and what is eternal. The existence of Satan and the temptation he offers are not meant to destroy humanity, but to deepen its relationship with the divine. In the struggle to resist evil, humanity refines its virtues of compassion, justice, patience, and wisdom. These are not inherent qualities that would simply be known without the need for trials. Just as gold is purified by fire, the soul is purified through its resistance to the forces of darkness. Satan, in this sense, is not an arbitrary force, but one woven into the cosmic fabric of creation for the purpose of facilitating human growth. It is through our engagement with the evil in the world that we are able to recognize the value of goodness and divine truth. Without temptation, without the lure of sin, humanity would not be able to fully comprehend the depth of its need for redemption and grace. This dynamic is not one of blind suffering, but one of awakening, a call to rise above the primal base urges and to move toward something higher. In the struggle with evil, humans are given the opportunity to reflect on their choices, to repent, and to align their will with the divine. As humanity evolves, it becomes increasingly clear that this moral and spiritual journey is not meant to be easy. The path toward divine understanding requires both struggle and surrender, the refusal to bow to temptation, and the acceptance of divine grace. Through the presence of evil, humanity is given the gift of free will, the chance to choose love, forgiveness, and compassion in a world that would often choose destruction. Satan's role, though often misunderstood, is essential in this process, as he provides the catalyst for humanity to move beyond its limitations and toward its highest potential, understanding that true spiritual growth is born not from the absence of challenge, but from the courage to face it head-on. The cosmic struggle between good and evil is not merely a battle for dominance. It is a profound, eternal dance that shapes the very nature of existence. From the beginning of time, this struggle has been woven into the fabric of creation, and its presence is inseparable from the divine plan. Good and evil are not opposing forces in a simplistic sense, but two elements that interact in a way that defines and refines the cosmos. The tension between these forces is what enables the unfolding of divine will, the shaping of souls, and the ultimate purpose of creation itself. It is a process that cannot be short-circuited or eliminated, for the struggle itself is a necessary part of the divine narrative. God, in His infinite wisdom, has not chosen to eliminate the forces of evil, but has allowed them to exist within the boundaries of free will. This choice is not a failure of divine power, but a testament to the depth of the love and freedom that God has bestowed upon creation. If there were no opposition, if there were no challenges, humanity would not have the opportunity to demonstrate its capacity for growth, wisdom, and spiritual awakening. The existence of evil makes the triumph of good more meaningful, more transformative. It is only through the ability to choose between light and darkness that the soul can fully appreciate the depth of divine love and the value of righteousness. The struggle itself, ongoing and eternal, is not without purpose. It serves as a crucible for the development of character, a space where beings can choose to align themselves with the divine or to rebel against it. Every moment of resistance against evil, every choice to uphold the good, is a step toward the fulfillment of God's plan. This plan is not about the eradication of evil through force, but the eventual reconciliation of creation through understanding, love, and divine justice. The ongoing battle shapes the future, for it is in the struggle that the path to ultimate redemption is made clear. The divine plan is not static. It is dynamic and unfolding. It recognizes the importance of the free will granted to all beings, knowing that true love, true goodness, can only emerge when it is chosen freely, not imposed by force. The struggle between good and evil provides the context in which humanity can transcend its limitations and evolve toward its highest potential. Without this struggle, there would be no growth, no learning, and ultimately, no meaningful relationship with the Creator. It is through facing and overcoming evil that humanity is drawn closer to the divine, not in spite of the battle, but because of it. Thus, the eternal struggle between good and evil is not a conflict that will ever be fully resolved until the appointed time. And that time is part of the divine plan. It is in the midst of this struggle that the story of creation unfolds, and it is through this ongoing tension that all things are brought to their ultimate fulfillment in the divine order. The final judgment is the culmination of all that has come before, the moment when every choice, every action, and every heart will be weighed by divine justice. For Satan and his followers, this judgment is both an inevitable consequence and a final reckoning. The entire narrative of creation, with its struggles, choices, and growth, has been leading toward this moment of truth. In the end, the battle between good and evil, the cosmic tension between light and darkness, will reach its resolution. Divine justice, which has been at work throughout history, will finally be made manifest in its fullness, and Satan, the great adversary, will face the consequences of his rebellion. This judgment is not merely about punishment. It is the final act of restoration, the moment when all things are brought into alignment with God's perfect will. Satan, in his pride and defiance, sought to disrupt the divine order, to tear apart the very fabric of creation. His influence has been felt throughout history, causing suffering, pain, and division. Yet, in the divine plan, even his rebellion has served a higher purpose, allowing for the refinement of creation, the testing of faith, and the deepening of love. However, just as creation cannot be left in chaos forever, neither can evil remain unchecked. The final judgment will be the moment when evil is completely separated from the good, when the forces of darkness are cast away for good, and when creation is purified. Divine justice is not an act of mere retaliation, but a reflection of God's eternal nature. It is not motivated by anger, but by the need for balance, order, and reconciliation. It is the expression of God's will to restore what was lost, to heal what was broken, and to make right the wrongs that have been committed. In this final judgment, Satan's influence will be extinguished, not out of spite, but as a necessary step to complete the cosmic plan. His role, however disruptive, will come to an end, and the world will be freed from his grasp. His followers, those who chose rebellion over divine love, will share in the consequences of their choices. The ultimate defeat of Satan is not just his punishment, but the triumph of good over evil. It is the restoration of the divine order, the final and complete reconciliation of all things to their Creator. This judgment marks the end of the struggle, the closing of the chapter on rebellion, and the beginning of a new era in which evil will no longer have a foothold. It is the moment when all things are made new, when the fullness of God's love is realized, and when creation is brought to its intended perfection. In this final judgment, divine justice will prevail, and Satan's reign will end, as will the suffering he has caused. The eternal victory of good will be fully realized. Mercy stands as one of the most profound expressions of God's divine nature, a characteristic woven into the fabric of creation itself. It is not merely an act of kindness or forgiveness. It is the very essence of divine love at work, seeking to heal and restore rather than to destroy. Throughout the narrative of creation, God's mercy has been ever present, a guiding force that tempers justice and extends grace to those who seek it. The story of the world, with all its failures, suffering, and rebellion, is also a story of mercy, mercy that never gives up on creation, even when it seems undeserving. Satan, in his rebellion, chose the path of defiance, a choice that led him away from the divine light and into darkness. Yet, even in his fall, God's mercy remains a cornerstone of the divine story. While Satan's rebellion is the epitome of pride and ambition, God's mercy has always been available, even to him. The reality of Satan's continued existence is a paradox wrapped in mercy. If God were to destroy Satan in anger, it would mean the absence of mercy, the very thing that sustains the balance of the universe. In the divine narrative, God does not act out of unchecked wrath, for such actions would reflect the very corruption Satan embodies. Mercy is not about excusing wrongdoing, nor is it about allowing evil to persist indefinitely. It is about offering the opportunity for redemption, for the chance to turn from darkness to light. The existence of evil, as embodied by Satan, has always been allowed to persist because, in the grand scheme, mercy allows space for transformation and growth. Were it not for God's mercy, creation would not be able to progress through its trials, its tests of faith, and its moments of grace. Satan's role, however disruptive, serves to highlight the need for mercy. In allowing evil to persist for a time, God grants creation the space to recognize its need for redemption and for the healing power that only divine mercy can bring. In the end, Satan cannot be destroyed in anger because to do so would undermine the very mercy that gives life to the universe. Destruction and wrath would be the final closing off of all possibility for healing, leaving no room for reconciliation. Divine mercy, by contrast, holds open the door for transformation, even for Satan. It is an acknowledgement that, though evil may have its day, the ultimate purpose of creation is restoration, not annihilation. Mercy does not seek to erase the past but to heal it, to make things right. In this way, Satan's continued existence is not a flaw in divine justice, but a testament to God's capacity for mercy, a mercy that stands as the foundation for all creation and the ultimate reason that evil cannot simply be destroyed. God's wrath, though a powerful force, is not unrestrained or chaotic. It is a measured, purposeful expression of divine justice that seeks balance rather than destruction for its own sake. Divine wrath is not a reflection of uncontrolled anger, but rather a necessary response to the corruption that threatens the harmony of creation. It is tempered by God's boundless love and mercy, which provides space for redemption even in the face of evil. While human wrath often stems from hurt or frustration, God's wrath is fundamentally different. It is a tool of justice, not vengeance. The ultimate purpose of divine justice is not to obliterate but to restore, to bring order where disorder has taken root, and to guide creation back to its original design. Satan's existence, despite his rebellion and the harm he causes, is an integral part of the divine plan. God's wrath, though directed at the forces of evil, does not extend to annihilation because such an act would disrupt the balance of creation. To completely destroy Satan would erase an essential piece of the cosmic puzzle, leaving the world incomplete. Divine justice is about restoring, not eliminating. By allowing Satan's influence to persist, God provides an opportunity for humanity to understand the consequences of their choices, to experience the contrast between good and evil, and to ultimately choose righteousness. The annihilation of Satan would not allow for the full exercise of free will, nor would it honor the sacred process of growth that God has established for all creation. The ability to choose between good and evil is vital for the development of true faith and spiritual maturity. If God were to simply eradicate Satan, he would effectively be removing the challenge that makes human choices meaningful. The very existence of evil, while tragic, offers the opportunity for individuals to align with God through love and faith, rather than through coercion or mere compliance. In this light, God's wrath against Satan is not about the destruction of the evil one but the limitation of his power. Satan is allowed to act within certain boundaries, but those boundaries are defined by God's eternal wisdom. God's wrath against evil is not about erasing the source of evil but about curbing its influence, ensuring that the ultimate victory of good over evil is achieved not through annihilation, but through the process of spiritual refinement and divine justice. Satan's continued existence serves as a reminder that evil, though present, is neither permanent nor invincible. It can be resisted and overcome, and its power is always subject to God's sovereign will. In the end, the victory of light over darkness is not just a future event. It is an inevitable culmination of divine purpose, a triumph that resonates through every facet of creation. The very fabric of the universe is designed to reflect the eternal conflict between good and evil, light and darkness. But it is the nature of this struggle that light is destined to overcome. Darkness, though powerful and persistent, is temporary. It exists not as a permanent force, but as a challenge to be met, a test to be endured. The triumph of light is not merely the extinguishing of darkness, but the fulfillment of divine will, the manifestation of God's eternal wisdom, love, and justice. God, in His infinite grace, allows darkness to have its time, to challenge the hearts and minds of His creation. But He has always known that light would prevail. Light, as a symbol of truth, love, and righteousness, is indestructible in its essence. Darkness, though it can obscure and twist, cannot create or sustain itself. It is dependent on the absence of light. Light, on the other hand, is self-sustaining, a reflection of God's divine nature. Its victory is not just inevitable, but necessary for the restoration and completion of creation. The process of this victory is not always immediate or easy. Throughout the course of history, darkness has seemed to dominate, casting long shadows over humanity's journey. Yet even in the darkest moments, the light has always been present, guiding, nurturing, and ultimately leading creation toward its ultimate fulfillment. The victory of light is the victory of truth, the revelation of God's plan for all things. It is the fulfillment of the divine promise that all things will be made right, that justice will be served, and that love will ultimately prevail. In the cosmic struggle, light is not only a force of power but a force of healing. It is through light that wounds are healed, that creation is restored, and that redemption is made possible. The victory of light means the redemption of all things, the reconciliation of the brokenness caused by evil, and the return to harmony with God's divine will. The ultimate fulfillment of divine purpose is the restoration of creation to its original design, where light reigns supreme and darkness is banished to its rightful place. In this victory, the presence of darkness will be no more, for it will have served its purpose, testing and refining the strength of the light. As light triumphs, it does not simply overpower darkness but transforms it, redeeming all things. The triumph of light is the ultimate act of divine love, bringing everything into alignment with God's perfect will, where all things are made new and evil is forever vanquished. This victory is not just the end of a battle, it is the completion of the story, where the beauty of divine love, truth, and light shine through all creation, bringing it to its fullest, most glorious expression. Evil, in its purest form, is not an entity created by God, but a distortion of good, a corruption of the divine order. It enters the world through free will, the choice to act against the will of God, and it is allowed to persist for reasons beyond human understanding. However, in the grand tapestry of creation, even evil has its place, and this place serves a divine purpose. The transformation of evil is not immediate nor always clear, but it is necessary for the ultimate triumph of good. Satan's existence, as dark and destructive as it may appear, plays an essential role in the unfolding of the divine plan. Evil's transformation lies in its ability to challenge and refine that which is good. If the world were free from the influence of darkness, there would be no opportunity for growth, no tests of faith or resilience. It is in the struggle against evil that humanity learns to stand firm, to choose good in the face of temptation, and to understand the true nature of divine love. This paradox, where evil seems to work against the very forces that oppose it, is the key to understanding why Satan's existence is not only permitted, but ultimately serves the greater good. Satan, through his rebellion and influence, forces the hand of creation to move forward. His presence compels humanity to grapple with the questions of morality, justice, and faith. It is through this struggle that humanity finds its place within the divine narrative. Without the existence of evil, there would be no need for redemption, no need for salvation, and no recognition of the power of divine love. Satan's role, although tragic, is pivotal in helping creation understand the contrast between good and evil, truth and deception. This contrast is what allows humanity to fully appreciate the divine light when it shines forth. The transformation of evil is a gradual process, one that stretches over the course of history. As creation moves toward its ultimate end, the influence of evil is slowly diminished, not by force or destruction, but by the unwavering presence of good. God, in his infinite wisdom, allows evil to persist for a time, but not without purpose. Each act of evil serves to refine the goodness it opposes, leading ultimately to a world where light triumphs and darkness is no more. In this way, Satan's existence becomes the crucible in which the purity of good is tested and strengthened. In the end, the transformation of evil into something that serves divine purpose is not a matter of annihilation but redemption. Through the struggles it causes, evil becomes the catalyst for the growth of virtue. The ultimate triumph of good is not the eradication of darkness but the redemption of all creation. Satan's role in this grand plan is to provide the challenge, the test, the opposition that allows good to shine all the more brightly. It is through this tension, this balance between good and evil, that the divine will is realized, and creation is brought to its ultimate fulfillment. Satan's final fate, though foretold in many prophecies, is one of profound paradox. His ultimate defeat is assured, yet his existence will not end in complete destruction. The very nature of this end speaks volumes about the divine justice and mercy that God has woven into the fabric of creation. Satan, in his rebellion, has caused immense harm, sowing seeds of corruption and chaos. However, in the grand scheme of things, his fate serves a purpose beyond mere vengeance. It reflects the fullness of divine will, balancing judgment with the opportunity for redemption and showing that even the greatest of wrongdoers can be an instrument in the fulfillment of a higher plan. The defeat of Satan is not a simple eradication of evil. Rather, it is the culmination of the cosmic struggle, a moment when the forces of good have triumphed, not by destroying evil, but by overcoming it. Satan will be bound, confined to his place in the cosmic order, unable to influence or deceive as he once did. But this is not the obliteration of his being. He will exist, his nature unchanged, yet powerless in the face of the overwhelming power of divine light. His final defeat is a victory of God's unwavering love and justice, a declaration that evil has been faced, resisted, and ultimately rendered impotent. This end, however, is not a simple annihilation, for in the divine wisdom, even Satan's existence serves a higher purpose. His rebellion, the suffering he has caused, and the trials he has set before humanity, all have contributed to the unfolding of the divine narrative. In the same way that darkness is necessary for light to be fully appreciated, Satan's role in this story has been essential. He has tested the strength of faith, the resilience of good, and the depth of God's mercy. Through his existence, the nature of love, grace, and redemption has been revealed in its fullness. As Satan is defeated and his influence finally rendered powerless, he will not be destroyed in the sense that would imply complete vanishing. His being, his essence, remains. But now he stands as a testimony to the divine victory over evil. The fire of his rebellion has been extinguished, but the echoes of his actions remain, serving as a reminder of the cost of free will and the weight of choices made. In this way, his final fate speaks to the ultimate truth that while evil may seem to thrive for a time, it is not eternal. Goodness, love, and justice, though sometimes hidden beneath the weight of darkness, will always prevail. Thus, Satan's defeat, while assured, will be the closing of one chapter, not the destruction of his being. It is a demonstration of the final triumph of divine will, where even the greatest adversary is rendered powerless, not by annihilation, but by the overwhelming light of truth and love that now governs creation. The legacy of free will is intricately woven into the very essence of creation, and it plays a pivotal role in God's decision to allow Satan's existence rather than annihilate him. Free will is not merely a gift granted to humanity. It is a fundamental principle of the divine order, an inherent part of what it means to be created in the image of God. Without free will, there could be no true relationship between creator and creation, no authentic love or worship, and no real capacity for moral choice. It is the gift that makes us who we are, and it is precisely because of this that God cannot simply erase Satan from existence. To eradicate Satan would be to violate the very principle that makes creation meaningful. The rebellion of Lucifer, his transformation into Satan, was an act of free will, as much a choice as any decision made by humanity throughout history. God did not create a universe of puppets, where every action and thought was predetermined. Instead, he granted his creation the freedom to choose, to grow, to learn, and to ultimately decide how they would interact with him and the world he made. This freedom allows for a genuine relationship, but it also allows for the possibility of corruption, as Satan's own rebellion clearly demonstrates. Satan's existence, therefore, is inextricably linked to the gift of free will. His rebellion, though tragic and destructive, is a direct result of the freedom God granted him. To remove Satan would not only be to erase an individual entity, but to undermine the very foundation of what makes love, faith, and choice meaningful. For if God were to simply destroy those who rebelled, there would be no real freedom in the world at all. People would no longer be able to truly choose good over evil, for they would be denied the freedom to make that choice in the first place. The presence of Satan, in all his malevolent power, serves as a stark reminder of the cost of free will. It reminds us that evil is not an arbitrary force, but a consequence of the choices made by beings who were granted autonomy by their Creator. Satan's existence stands as a symbol of what happens when freedom is misused, but it also underscores the importance of preserving that freedom. Without it, there could be no true growth, no real path to redemption, no possibility of discovering the depths of God's love. God's decision to allow Satan to continue his existence, despite his rebellion, is ultimately a reflection of the divine respect for free will. To destroy Satan would be to disregard the very freedom that makes creation possible. It would mean that God had not truly given his creation the power to choose and the responsibility to live with the consequences of those choices. In the end, free will remains paramount in understanding why God cannot simply remove Satan from existence. It is a necessary part of God's plan for the growth and salvation of creation. The concept of final redemption extends far beyond the immediate understanding of good and evil. It reaches into the very heart of divine grace and the ultimate purpose of creation. It is not a redemption that is limited to human beings or even to the spiritual realm, but one that encompasses all of creation, including Satan himself. The nature of this redemption is rooted in the transformative power of grace, which has the capacity to restore and renew even the most fallen of beings. While the idea of redemption is often associated with humanity's return to grace after the fall, it is a far-reaching process that speaks to the cosmic scale of God's plan. Satan, as the embodiment of rebellion and the adversary of God's will, stands as a paradox in this plan of redemption. His very existence, rooted in the exercise of free will and the subsequent fall from grace, serves as a crucial element in the unfolding drama of creation. If Satan were to be destroyed outright, it would not only disrupt the intricate balance of free will and divine purpose, but would also sever a vital aspect of the process through which ultimate redemption is achieved. His presence, though seemingly contradictory to the idea of divine goodness, is paradoxically woven into the fabric of redemption, serving as a necessary catalyst for the fulfillment of God's will. Through Satan's rebellion, the nature of free will, suffering, and the need for grace becomes apparent. Without the existence of evil, there could be no meaningful understanding of good. Without Satan's influence, humanity's journey toward redemption would lack the depth of choice and struggle that is integral to spiritual growth. The battle between good and evil is not a temporary conflict, but a process that ultimately refines creation, leading it to a deeper understanding of divine love and justice. Satan's role is not to be viewed merely as an antagonist, but as a necessary figure in the divine narrative that brings clarity to the nature of God's redemptive work. It is through the existence of such an adversary that humanity is given the opportunity to choose, to wrestle with temptation, and to seek grace. Each act of redemption, whether it is the forgiveness of sins or the restoration of a fallen soul, becomes a reflection of God's immense grace, a grace that even Satan, through his eventual defeat, will come to know. The ultimate redemption of all creation, including Satan, is the fulfillment of God's perfect plan, a plan that does not aim to destroy, but to transform. Just as humanity is given the opportunity to repent and be restored, so too will the final outcome be a restoration of even the darkest forces. Satan's inability to be destroyed outright stems from the understanding that redemption is not about erasing the past, but about transforming it. His existence, in the context of divine grace, reveals the depths of God's mercy and the ultimate victory of light over darkness. In the end, Satan's role in the cosmic narrative is not one of annihilation, but of transformation, leading to a greater revelation of God's love and the final redemption of all things. The restoration of creation's harmony is the final fulfillment of God's divine plan, a plan that has unfolded over time through moments of trial, suffering, and redemption. It is not simply the absence of evil or the eradication of conflict, but a return to a state where all things align perfectly within the scope of God's eternal will. After the defeat of evil, the final state of peace will not be a mere cessation of struggle, but the completion of a journey toward wholeness, where creation is at last reconciled with its Creator. This restoration is not a return to a previous state, as if the cosmic wheel of time could be turned back. Instead, it is the fulfillment of the potential that was always inherent in creation. The struggle between good and evil, the tension of free will, and the redemptive process have all served to refine and elevate creation toward its ultimate purpose. The presence of evil, particularly in the form of Satan and his followers, has not been meaningless. It has been part of a divine process, a test that has allowed for the full expression of God's grace, mercy, and justice. Through the testing and the trials, creation has been shaped into something that reflects the divine will more clearly, more profoundly, and more perfectly. The defeat of evil marks the culmination of a divine judgment that serves not only to punish, but to heal. Just as a surgeon removes a malignant growth to restore health to the body, so does divine judgment cleanse the world of the corruption brought by rebellion. Yet, unlike human justice, which can end in destruction or condemnation, God's judgment is always redemptive. Even in the defeat of evil, there is the promise of restoration, the promise that what was broken will be made whole, that all things will be reconciled to their original, divine purpose. After the defeat of Satan and the final judgment, creation will experience a peace that is not fragile, not subject to the corruption of sin, but an eternal peace that flows from the very nature of God. This peace is the harmony of a world fully attuned to the divine, where suffering and conflict no longer hold sway. There will be no more tears, no more pain, no more temptation, for the forces of evil will have been completely vanquished. Creation will function in perfect unity, every part fulfilling its intended role without hindrance or disorder. In this restored state, humanity will live in the fullness of their divine purpose. No longer distracted or burdened by sin, humans will be free to experience the full measure of God's love and grace, participating in the harmony of the universe. The relationship between God and creation will be one of pure communion, without the veil of separation that sin once imposed. This is the peace that surpasses understanding. The final state of creation, where everything is as it was always meant to be, in perfect harmony with the Creator. The establishment of the eternal kingdom is the final realization of God's divine will, a realm where good reigns supreme, where peace and righteousness permeate every aspect of existence. It is not a fleeting moment of tranquility, but a lasting state, woven into the very fabric of creation. This kingdom transcends all human understanding of time and space, a place where suffering, death, and the forces of evil have no dominion. In this eternal kingdom, the fullness of God's glory is revealed, and the creatures of creation live in perfect harmony with their Creator. Yet, this kingdom, though established in divine perfection, could not have come to pass without the essential role of the forces that once stood in opposition to God, particularly Satan. His existence, though bound in rebellion and defiance, served a purpose in the divine plan, one that would unfold in ways unseen, yet profoundly transformative. Without the challenge posed by evil, the beauty and power of good could not be fully understood. Without the fall, there could be no ascent, and without the struggle, no triumph. The existence of Satan and his rebellion provided the context in which humanity's free will was tested, where the depth of God's mercy, justice, and grace was demonstrated. Satan's role, though destructive in its initial intent, became an essential part of the cosmic process that led to the establishment of this eternal kingdom. Through the trials of temptation and the consequences of sin, humanity was drawn closer to the truth of their dependence on God and the reality of divine grace. The choice to follow good, to choose love over hate, justice over cruelty, became meaningful because of the existence of evil. In the grand design, Satan's rebellion was allowed to unfold to its fullest extent, only for it to be revealed as futile in the end. A temporary force destined to be defeated. The final kingdom would not be a passive, unchallenged peace, but a victory over evil, made all the more glorious because of the battle that had been fought. Thus, Satan could not be destroyed in the process because his existence was not without purpose. He was not a mere obstacle to be obliterated, but a catalyst for the divine revelation of truth. The eternal kingdom was made all the richer by the fact that it emerged from the ashes of rebellion. In the face of all evil, good triumphed not through force, but through the power of divine love, mercy, and sacrifice. The eternal kingdom is a testament to the reality that even the most destructive force, in its eventual defeat, serves the greater good. In this way, Satan's role, though tragic, was essential for the realization of a kingdom where peace, joy, and love reign forever. The eternal peace that follows his defeat is not the absence of conflict, but the victory of good over evil, the full restoration of God's divine order.